there, and welcome to another episode of The Bible. Wait, what? Yes, this is the podcast that unravels the mysteries of the Bible's most perplexing, puzzling, and thought-provoking passages. My name is Rohan, and each session I'm joined by a member of our team at C3 Church Camden, Picton and Thirroul as they quiz me on some of the more complicated, confusing, challenging, and even confronting passages that we read in our weekly Bible reading plan. We understand that reading the Bible can be a challenging and perplexing experience. Many people just don't know where to start, they get confused, and so they give up. Well, that's why this podcast exists, to equip you with the tools and the knowledge to explore the richness and depth of the Bible for yourself. So grab your Bible, take a deep breath, and join us as we explore this week's passages. To learn more about us or to get in touch with us at C3 Church Camden, Picton and Thirroul, visit any of our three locations' websites. That's c3camden.church, c3picton.church and c3thirroul.church. Or you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube just by searching for any of our locations' names. So without any further delay, let's dive into today's conversation.
Hello. I love how in the intro there you say perplexing and challenging.
Perplexing and challenging. Are you going to perplex us and challenge us today, Jeanie?
Well, I am certainly perplexed and challenged by the book of Mark. The Gospel of Mark.
We're in week 2 now, aren't we?
Yeah, week 2. And today we're doing... Oh, my name's Jeanie. And I'm sitting
hello.
here with Rohan.
Hello. we just you all know us by now.
Straight
welcome
into
if this is your first episode.
Yes, good
this
luck.
This is episode number 49 or something now.
Is it really?
Something like that, I think.
Wow. We should celebrate.
Yeah, I'll have to count how many we've got. Actually, I can count. Look, let me just check. We'll be able to work it out.
Just use ChatGPT.
How
many do we have?
No, I can just work it out from here because I've got numbers on them. Now, this is, we're now 44, 45. This is 46. Episode 46. Yeah,
That's
I'm just
pretty
going.
amazing.
43, as we're recording this, 43 is just released. And then we've got 2 before this, so there'll be 46. Yep.
Okay, so we just released our intro.
We just released our intro. As you're listening to this, that was 3 weeks ago.
Yes. Yeah, we like to be on top of things and record earlier
try to
and mix it up. That's our plan, right?
That's the plan. Yeah, trying to get as far ahead as we can.
Yes, and today we're talking about Mark chapters 6 to 10. And last week I did confess to you that I don't like the book of Mark.
You did. Yeah.
I still don't like the book of Mark.
Still don't. You're still struggling with Mark.
I'm
Poor
struggling
Mark.
with Mark, yeah. And I
Another thing about it is there's 5 chapters we're doing this year, but the thing about the Gospels is they have the longest chapters of any part of the Bible. So
they're so long.
They're long, aren't they?
Yes.
The Gospel writers really, if you put it in other chapters, they're much, much longer. Probably 2 chapters on average in any other part of the Bible.
Well, as I was reading through this, I'd think, I've got to the end, and then you turn the page, it's
There's
like,
more.
oh no,
there's a whole different story. Now he's going to feed the 5,000.
Oh, no.
Yep, exactly.
Oh, I sound too honest, don't I?
Yeah.
I do love it. I do love reading it, but it's a challenge and perplexing.
Perplexing and challenging. Okay.
Yes.
Let's see if we can de-perplex and unchallenge you.
That doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense, does it?
So part of this journey, why I chose to do, I'm going to do the first 3 on the book of Mark, and why I chose to do it is because I really struggle with the character of Jesus. And I mentioned that before, and it must sound so funny to people hearing this, but I do. He seems so hard to pin down.
Oh, yes.
And in Mark, there's just a lack of imagination.
Right, Mark's just telling the story.
Just tells the story.
Yep.
Like bland and boring.
Yeah.
And do you think that, or is it just me?
Well, I don't think it's bland and boring, but
no, that's just me.
That's just you. No, but he does focus on just telling a lot more of the story. But we're not getting a massive amount of character development. And I guess what I probably do without even thinking about it subconsciously is I blend in what I know of Jesus from the other Gospels into this. So when I'm reading a story, I'm already thinking it through the lens of what I already know. But your point is that if someone's sitting down and just doesn't know anything about Jesus and just reads the book of Mark, you're probably not going to get a lot of character development about the heart of Jesus. It's there. I think as I was preparing for this episode, I think there's some powerful insights that we see in his interactions with the Pharisees especially, and then his interactions with the crowd that'll help us. But it's not focusing on as at depth the way the other Gospels are on him as a person or his character.
But you know what? As I did confess what I just confessed, I also must admit that the more I read it, the more I am finding out who he is.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm doing this. I'm on this journey to discover him.
Yeah.
And were you going to say something then?
No, keep going. I agree. Sorry, I should just keep my mouth shut when you're talking.
Yeah, just be quiet.
Just be
Can't
quiet
I just
for a
do this
change?
whole thing? This episode is just me.
Just
you know,
Jeanie.
yada, yada, yada,
I'll
blah,
just nod.
blah. Just nod along because everyone
Actually,
can hear
folks,
that.
that's a lesson I've got to learn is that Jill and I do this on our other Ministry Matters podcast.
You have another podcast?
I do.
That's just, are you cheating on this one or
no? No, they're two different podcasts. But we just have to learn to nod at each other because every time we just have that mental assent and agree with one another, it comes out on the podcast, so it's interrupting. So it's just a skill in face-to-face conversation. You do interact and you say, yeah, yes, good point. But on podcast, I've got to stop saying that. And I was doing it really well before Christmas, but I'm just out of practice. I'll get back in there.
Yeah, well, we have had some time off.
We have. So apologies if I interrupt. I'll just start nodding.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop blabbing and let's get into these chapters.
Okay, let's do it then. We'll go to chapter 6.
6. I did want to state, in case you hadn't listened to the first podcast, can you remind us again who wrote this book?
This is Mark, who is probably John Mark, probably a cousin of Barnabas and related in some way to Peter. And so a lot of scholars think that, and this is probably John Mark who refers to him later on as being with Paul, and left Paul when things got a bit tough, and then came back to into Paul's ministry much later in life. So that's who he is. And this gospel's probably being told, scholars think, it's pretty much Peter's retelling of the gospel.
So Peter's eyewitness account.
Eyewitness accounts, most likely.
Written via this other guy, John Mark. Okay.
This guy, John Mark.
So not a disciple. A disciple is not writing this book.
No, he's not on the 12 disciples.
Okay.
No, that's correct.
Just want to clarify because most people do think that the disciples wrote.
Yep, that's right. Well, Luke isn't. So Matthew and John, at the bookends of the 4, are the ones that were in the list. Mark and Luke, not in the original list of 12.
Okay, got that.
Good point, though.
Yeah, well, thank you. This is starting off well.
Yeah, we're doing well so far.
Okay, so here we are in chapter 6, and Jesus returns to his hometown, Nazareth. And it's almost like he's come back as a new person, according to the town. Like they don't recognize him. He wants to do miracles. He's preaching, and he's suddenly this man of importance, and they don't believe it. They find it very hard to accept.
Yep, they're struggling to accept who he is. Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, I was nodding silently.
Yes. They can't hear you.
And then she
nod.
looked at me and she said, you need to interact. You can see it in the eyes. You need to be interacting. I was nodding, but if you're listening, you won't know I'm nodding.
All right. Maybe I should just say Rowan's nodding.
Rowan's nodding now.
Okay. So I'm reading from the Message as well because, again, this is a
challenge
translation I haven't liked. This is the year of not
I was talking to Ben Crofts yesterday in church on Sunday at Thirroul, and he was saying he ran a Bible study years ago where 90% of the people only wanted to use the Message. And I said, it's usually the other way around. And he said, it's like if he struggled to get anybody to use a different version than the Message. So I've never experienced that before.
No,
Normally there's people who are Message haters.
Message haters, yeah. Well, I've been on their side, but I'm using it this time on purpose because it's cracking open a few little verses that previously weren't to me before, but it's also giving me some good laughs.
Yes, it is.
The translation.
It will for sure.
Yeah, it doesn't even feel like scripture really, but it does. It is engaging.
Yeah, I did say this last time. Eugene Peterson didn't write it for theology, but he was a theologian. He was a scholar when he wrote it, so he has done a good job with interpretation. He's put his bent on it. So it's not unlike most Bible versions, which are probably a whole collegiate approach of a number of scholars that work things out. This is one man writing the translation, but it's still useful. Just don't use it on its own.
And it's a great effort to
it's
do
a
this,
huge effort.
translating this. All right, so Jesus left there. Where did he leave before?
I think he had probably just been. We picked that up. Had he just been where he'd healed? He'd been across the lake and then he'd come back. He'd been to the 10 towns and healed the demoniac. And then he came back across the lake and he healed the the woman with the issue of blood. Is that correct? Am I right in that? And yes, and the little girl, Jairus' daughter. Yeah, so he's back in Jewish territory.
I don't even remember what we talked about last time.
That's right. No, I checked it up beforehand.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
so that's where we were last time, and and that's on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. And now he's going to go to Nazareth, which is up out of the Sea of Galilee, up the hill a little bit. Probably, I'm going to guess half a day's walk from the Sea of Galilee, maybe something like that.
All right, I'm going to just start reading.
Yep.
So his disciples came along with him, and on the Sabbath he gave a lecture in the meeting place in Nazareth. He made a real hit, impressing everyone. We had no idea he was this good, they said. How did he get so wise all of a sudden and get such ability? But in the next breath, they were cutting him down. He's just a carpenter, Mary's boy. We've known him since he was a kid. We know his brothers and his sisters. Who does he think he is? They tripped over what little they knew about him and fell sprawling, and they never got any further. I have two questions about this. First of all, why did Jesus hide his ministry for so long? Because he's grown up in Nazareth, Egypt for some time, and then he's here, and he's just been a regular guy, an average guy, a carpenter guy.
Yep.
Strangely not married.
Yep.
Because it's weird to
not be married.
To not be married at that age. And I'm still living with his mum until he goes off on his ministry. And then, why didn't he do anything before?
That's a good question. I think it wasn't uncommon for rabbis to, or for people who became rabbis to enter into ministry about this age. That wasn't that uncommon.
But why would they call him just a carpenter? Was he studying to be a rabbi?
No, that's the thing is Jesus was never studying. Unlike other rabbis who did study and do Torah school, Jesus didn't. He's very clear he didn't do any Torah school. He had trained as a tekton, is what the word was in Greek.
A tekton.
A tekton, which is only translated carpenter, I think, in the King James Version. So we have, in English, we think of Jesus as a carpenter, but more likely he's a tekton, which is a builder, a general builder. He would have done some carpentry work with wood, but in that part of the world, more likely he was a stonemason. He was probably spent much more time building with stone than he would have spent building with wood.
Weird that he's a stonemason or a carpenter, like he's building the house.
Yes, exactly.
Did you ever think that before?
He was building houses, physical houses, before he was building God's house.
It's almost like he had to learn how to build this kind of house before he had to build the kingdom.
Maybe a little bit like David having to be a shepherd of the sheep before he could become the shepherd of the kingdom. Yeah, good call. Yeah. I've never thought about that before.
No, me neither. Yeah. Well, up until the other day. It's in my notes here.
No, I've never thought about it. That's a good thought. Yeah, definitely he's going through some kind of preparation phase there. The timing has to be perfect, has to be right, and when the time comes, he reveals himself. Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, he had a 3-year ministry.
Yes, yeah, about 3 years.
So he started at 30.
Yeah, 30-ish, yep.
Okay. So I can completely understand why these people would say this. He goes away.
Yep.
And we in the last chapters we were reading, we know that his mother and his family were worried about him. They thought he'd lost his mind. He was preaching to the point of not eating.
Yep.
And doing these crazy things. They wanted to drag him away. They thought he was, causing a problem maybe. And then he returns to this hometown.
Back to home, yep.
Yeah, and he's just sprouting off all these good theories, or whatever he's teaching and preaching.
Well, Luke tells us in Luke 2 about what he preaches. It's not Mark doesn't explain it, but Luke 2 is what gets them upset. I don't think Mark explains it here. No, but Luke 2 tells us that what he did is he quoted from Isaiah the prophet and said that day of God's kingdom is here, and
was that here? He said that?
That's here at Nazareth.
Okay.
And that's what they got upset about. Who does he think he is? He claimed to be the Messiah. Yeah. So because he actually claimed that Isaiah prophecy.
Okay. All right. Now
Luke 4, I think it is.
Luke 4. Okay. Now, it actually is Mark 3 here. This line, they tripped over what little they knew about him and fell sprawling.
Yeah, I love that.
I have to confess, that is me.
That
is
you?
100%
yeah, great. I see.
me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I trip over what I know because Jesus is so hard to find, because you read one thing, he's angry here, or he's loving here, or he's doing this. And
so just when you think you've got a hold on him, on who he is, he just blows your mind and gets outside of your boxes that you've constructed. Is that what you mean?
Yes, and particularly later on we're going to read about when he encounters a woman and he basically refers to her as a dog.
Yes,
in a way. And then you think, oh, here's Jesus loving the children, and then
now
he
he's
says
calling
this.
her a
It's
dog.
like, who is this guy?
Yeah,
so
great.
I keep tripping over all the time.
like that.
think I get something,
Yeah.
and I'm undone.
Oh, that's a really honest, and I think that's good. That's a better way to approach Jesus than to say, "Oh, I've got Jesus figured out." The moment we think we've got him figured out, we're in dangerous territory. Whether we figure that he's a madman or he's the Son of God, I think it's much better to come to this understanding that God's nature and character is always going to be beyond our understanding. So we come at it with a degree of humility.
Well, that's our big goal in life, I suppose, or one of the great questions in life is you have to answer whether you think this man who has completely changed history, and we're still talking about this guy 2,000 something years later, whether he is A, who he says he is, and he says he's the Son of God, or is he B, a madman?
Yep.
Because you can't be both.
I think it was Josh McDowell used to say,
a
is he
wise leader.
lunatic, liar, or Lord?
A wise leader. A lot of people say wise leader.
A good leader.
too.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. But he can't have a halfway. He's either who he says he is or he's not. The claims that he makes about himself are too grand.
And they're experiencing this here in Nazareth. They're like, this guy is, he's just average.
He's just Mary's boy. We know him.
Yeah, average guy, looks average, can't get a girl
Yeah.
in their mind.
That's right. They're thinking he's just a normal, everyday
he's
guy.
gone away. People didn't really move towns.
Nope.
They didn't go wandering, traveling.
Yep.
They would have been gossiping about him. Yeah.
Yeah. Familiarity here got in the way. I think that's the point, is that he could, we haven't got that far yet, but he couldn't do much in the hometown. It says because of their lack of faith, because their familiarity got in the way of their ability to embrace who Jesus was.
And so does our familiarity, you said that word a lot better than me. I always find myself tongue-tied on here. It's embarrassing.
I do it all the time. Don't worry about it.
Does it, our old thoughts, our current thoughts, do they really stop us from learning more?
Yes, almost without doubt. They do. Whoa, what is that noise? Oh, it's the curtain.
Someone's moving the curtain.
There's
a lot of action
There's a lot of
here.
action, a lot of activity over there. Sorry if that was coming through. So yes, there is familiarity gets in the way all the time of us. The moment we think we've pinned down Jesus, the moment we think we've pinned down the Bible, we are opening ourselves up to going off on a tangent, because the knowledge and the wisdom of God is beyond us. Paul says, the depths and wonders and knowledge of God, it's beyond our understanding. And I think we have to approach it with that level of humility that says, not humility. There you go. I got tongue-tied too.
Good.
That says there's more in this. So we have to come at it from that perspective, definitely. If we don't, we will stunt our growth. Like, we're about to launch into a series in a few weeks on the book of Revelation. I have completely changed my understanding of stuff that I was taught, completely undone it, and reading it from a totally different perspective than I have been taught in Bible college, for goodness sake. So I could have easily gone, oh no, I know everything there is to know, and I would be weaker for it. I'm richer for being prepared to undo everything I've learned in the past.
Can you see my eyes glazing over here? Just like everything you said.
Why are your eyes on
Revelation?
Revelation?
Just like,
Just
I
stay
can't
tuned,
hear
Jeannie.
this.
Stay tuned, Jeannie.
Let me
You
talk
don't
about
have
Mark.
to do any Revelation. You're doing any Revelation? You are doing the final one, aren't you?
Doing the final.
That's right.
But I'm not there yet.
No, so you're not there. You're working on Mark at the
I'm
moment.
working on
She's
Mark.
confused enough about Mark without going to Revelation.
Yes. See, if Rowan was nodding before, I'm shaking my head.
Yeah,
like,
that's
just
right.
stop
She's going,
talking.
Stop talking about Revelation.
Okay, back to this.
Yep.
All right. So here, basically, they were just convinced he's ordinary, but they are offended by him.
Yes.
And Mark does a great job at painting people's reactions to Jesus. These guys are completely offended.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus is offensive to some.
To some, yep.
Yeah. I like that idea.
Because remember we talked about this. One of the questions that Mark is asking is, who is this man?
Who is he? Yeah.
Yeah, and so, and he creates offense when he claims to be someone that they don't think he is or whatever. Yeah.
And it's like he has nothing to teach them because they're so offended. Their hearts are closed. Even though he's doing something extraordinary, they just can't even see it.
Yep.
They're offended. They don't even want to hear it. It's like, stop talking, leave town.
Yep.
I can see that happens in our world right now. Once you offend me, it's like,
It's called cancel culture, isn't
we're
it?
done.
Yep,
Yeah.
we're done. rather than still engaging in conversation. One of the worst things we can do is stick to our preconceptions and not be open-minded.
And do you think here, because I know these are short few verses, but there's so much going on in it, it's almost this idea that disbelief blocks the miracle.
Yeah.
It blocks the growth. Would you agree with
Oh,
that?
totally. It says in the NLT, verse 5, and because of their unbelief, he couldn't do many miracles. What does it say in your version?
He couldn't get over their stubbornness.
Yeah, and what?
Oh, no, the next, because I stopped reading.
Yeah, you stopped reading, yeah.
A prophet has a little honor in his hometown. This is verse 4 to 6. Gosh, we're only in the first few verses. Among his relatives on the street, he played as a child. Jesus wasn't able to do much of anything here. He laid hands on a few sick people and healed them. That's all. He couldn't get over their stubbornness. He left and made a circuit of the other villages teaching.
Right. So same point. It actually says he couldn't do many miracles. That should be quite confronting to us. We go, hang on a sec, is this the Son of God or not? Why can't he do miracles? And clearly the implication is because of their unbelief. In other words, their ability to see who Jesus was or not see who Jesus was either stymies or allows the power of God to move. And so, I mean, it's pretty cool that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them, and that's still pretty good by my standard.
Yeah.
but by Jesus' standard, the
Doesn't
implication
say they followed him, though.
No, they didn't follow him. No, we don't know what the result of those healings were, but the point of the story is Nazareth did not receive him. And the other Gospels will tell us they dragged him out of the synagogue and tried to throw him over the mountain.
And is that what they did in Nazareth?
That's what they did in Nazareth. You can actually, there's a traditional site. We took our team up there to the top of the hill and looks down over the mountain. It's very steep. Like if they had thrown him over there, he wasn't coming back.
That's an interesting tourist point.
It is. Nazareth
is the
is
spot where they wanted to throw
exactly.
Jesus.
There's a tourist spot for every Bible
off
story.
the mountain.
There's signs. There's no. You can't buy any little trinkets of. There's a spot where Jesus threw him over the mountain, but we were there and there were dogs and cats everywhere. It's just like a lookout platform.
But these chapters here, or these verses rather, it does raise the question: how much do I want to believe? How much do I want to see Jesus move in my life?
Yeah.
How much do I want? Yeah, just him. Do I want it? Do I want the miracles? Do I want the blessings?
Yep.
And Mark is telling me it's actually up to you.
It's actually up to you as to how much you believe or how much you let your familiarity or your contempt or your offense. That's the word they used, didn't they? Offense.
Yeah, offense.
That can get in the way.
No, I used that. They didn't use that.
Maybe it didn't. Yeah, it says in the New Living Translation, verse 3, they were deeply offended and refused to believe in him.
Oh, that's good for good way.
So there's definitely we can all do that. Food for thought.
Okay.
She's looking at me.
Like,
You're going on?
All right, okay.
Move on.
I'm going to keep going. From verses 7, Jesus called the 12 to him and sent them out in pairs. He gave them authority and power to deal with the evil opposition. He sent them off with these instructions. Don't think you need a lot of extra equipment for this. You are the equipment. No special appeals for funds. Keep it simple. And no luxury inns, as if they could have really existed. I don't know. They had no baths, running water, whatever.
The luxury inns are probably in Tiberias, but they didn't go near the town of Tiberias.
Get a modest place and be content there until you leave. If you're not welcomed, not listened to, quietly withdraw. Don't make a scene. Shrug your shoulders and be on your way. I much prefer where it says dust the dirt off your feet.
That's right. Shake off the dust of your feet.
Rather than shrug your shoulders.
Shrug your shoulders, yep. I think it's because the dust feet thing was probably a cultural thing. Doesn't transfer into the 21st century very clearly.
No, I think we talked about this at another point. I just can't remember. There was some relevance to it.
Yes, there is, but I don't recall what it is either.
Yeah.
It's definitely a cultural thing.
Totally, it's a removal, an absolute removal, forgetting, and also the accountability is on the town.
Yes, that's what it was. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
it's
the
back
town
on
is
them.
responsible for
You're
that.
now responsible.
Yes.
Yep, for your actions. I'm not taking any of your responsibility. Yep. So a symbolic meaning.
And why does he say to them, or give them power to, what's the word here, to
cast out
deal
demons?
with evil opposition?
Yeah.
We know Mark is really heavily invested in describing Jesus as having power over evil and over demons. Did they really have power to deal with evil opposition?
Yeah, it's what it's saying. He's designating that authority to them.
And why doesn't he say he gives them power to preach Or maybe it says in your translation, but he gives them to go and...
In this case, it's about doing more than speaking, because that's a big part of Mark's gospel here. I'm giving you authority to cast out evil spirits. So there is, obviously, it's implied that they would be teaching as they went, but really this is about Mark saying the kingdom of God is about doing stuff that pushes back, counteracts the kingdom of darkness. So evil spirits, Mark's big on, we'll see the calming of the storm, all those things that show that Jesus' power over the spirit realm and the natural world, which is really a claim to be God. So he's going to focus on that, not the preaching.
And how early on is this in his discipleship of them?
I think it's quite early.
Quite early. So he sends them out. They have really no message to preach.
They're not
They're
perfect.
going out to do things. Yeah. And it seems to be a trust exercise.
I wonder if that's what it is.
Yes.
Have a crack.
A crack.
Jesus is saying have a crack.
Trust in me for everything.
Yep.
Like, don't take anything with you. You're the special equipment.
Yep.
That's a funny
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
You are the equipment.
You are the equipment, yeah. And that everything comes from him. Like the idea that he could pass his own authority onto them, that would have been a strange thing to hear or to understand, don't you think?
I don't know. No, I think Jewish people would have had a concept of designated authority. They see it throughout the Bible, the anointing concept, that the transfer of authority comes from Moses to Joshua and so on. So I think they would have seen that's a physical transfer when Jesus lays his hands on them or delegates to them, that they understand I'm carrying some kind of authority now. I don't think that's a rare thing. That would be my take on that.
I'm glad you said lay hands on. Is that the idea here? He lays his hands on, and although it doesn't actually
say that here. It may in another version, I don't know. But that was a common way of transferring authority in ancient times, in biblical times, and in other cultures too. That laying on of hands was like a transference of authority or power.
And this exercise here of them going out in pairs, who's this really for? The disciples or the towns they're going to? Who's learning the most here? Or benefiting the most?
Is it okay to say both? I don't doubt for a moment that the principle is Jesus is really instructing his disciples, because not this version because it's Mark's is much truncated, but one of the other versions, they'll come back and say, oh, even the demons submit to us in your name. And Jesus teaches them and says, look, it's great that the demons submit to you, but that's not what you should be rejoicing. You should be rejoicing that your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. So he's using it as a teaching exercise for them, but it's also clear that he's using it to prepare them. Other versions will say that he sends them out to prepare all the villages that he's going to come to. So he's going out and kind of softening up the soil in preparation for him to then do a circuit of the towns as well.
A bit like the guy from the 10 towns, the madmans in the
a little
previous
bit like
chapters.
That previous chapter, which we're going to see in a couple of chapters' time too, when Jesus goes back there to the 10 towns. Exactly. So I think there's a softening. So I'd say both. That would
a
be
bit like a marketing thing. Like they go into town, they do these acts in his name, and then weeks later, Jesus turns up. It's like, hey, here's the guy. We did it in his name.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, that's right. And not only that too, they were used to traveling. We're not talking about a massive region here across the Galilee. So
just thought you said the galaxy.
The galaxy, that's a big region. The Galilee. So it's quite possible that, because obviously we read plenty of times where crowds came to him. We're going to see that in a moment. I wonder if they go out, do a few miracles, talk about Jesus, and then the crowds start to follow him. They find out where Jesus is and they flock to him. And maybe the flocking of the crowds came from not just the word getting out there, but actually the disciples going out there and spreading the good news.
This isn't at all written in there, but I was just thinking about the disciples going out, sort of gaining strength, I suppose, in their own ministry.
Yeah.
I'm starting to think of human reactions. They would be going out, or their own reactions, thinking that they were powerful, maybe that they could do this without him. There would have been many different emotions and fears and worries and pride going on. Yeah, well,
we've seen the first 2 episodes. Have you seen the first 2 episodes of season 4 of The Chosen? Did you go and watch them at the movies?
No, I have not.
Spoiler alert. I think it's coming out this week.
Spoiler
alert. season 4, the first 2 episodes are centered around a lot of this stuff in Mark chapters 5, 6, 7, thereabouts. So we're going to you see the disciples arguing with each other about who's the greatest. You see the death of John the Baptist. You see all these stories. So it's obviously centered around this time. And the way they do the whole arguing with each other about who's the greatest is brilliant, because it's exactly, I see myself in that so much, you know. But that's it. They go out and do great things, and they go, oh, look at me, I must be someone special. Yeah. And Jesus kind of knocks them down a peg. Yeah, when they come back.
Sounds really good.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's probably I reckon those first 2 episodes might be the best 2 episodes I've ever seen of The Chosen.
It's really good to hear, because often when we read the scriptures, we just sort of immortalize these characters.
Yeah.
And we don't humanize them at all.
No.
We think they're actually perfect.
Yeah. They're far from perfect, these guys.
And
Jesus
just
is
young
still working
fishermen.
with them. Young guys, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Which we will see. We will read that funny stuff coming up. Okay, so moving on. Where are we at? Here, verse
We're up to
14.
The death of John the Baptist.
The death of John the Baptist. And this is a strange segue in the running order,
Yeah.
or in the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
It just sort of fills
Cuts
in.
across, doesn't it?
Cuts across, fills in what's happened outside of the story of Jesus.
And then we're going to go back to the crowds. Yes, exactly.
Yep. So King Herod. Who's King Herod?
This is Herod Antipas, who is the son of Herod the Great. So this is the Herod who Jesus will be executed under. He is the son. He's the Herod of. He's the king of Judea.
So he's a local leader. He's not Roman.
He's not a Roman. He's an Idumean, which is a neighbouring country to the Israelites.
So in some way, he's sold out to the Romans.
Absolutely sold out to the Romans. Yeah, he was appointed over that region.
If you don't know, the Romans were the oppressors. They have run the land at the moment.
Yep, their empire, they're part of the Roman Empire. Yep, at this time. They're occupied. They're an occupied territory.
Yes. Okay. So King Herod, and he hears all this about Jesus because by the time the name of Jesus was on everyone's lips, he said, this has to be John the Baptizer come back from the dead. That's why he's able to work miracles. And others say, no, it's Elijah. Why would they say it was Elijah?
I think there was a belief that Elijah would come back based on Malachi. The very last few verses of the Old Testament say that I will send Elijah ahead of the prophet, because John the Baptist will refer to that. So there's that belief that that's who they think he might be. And
when I read this, when he mentions Elijah, later chapters, I don't think we're going to talk about them today, it's like Mark is plot pointing.
Plot pointing.
Yes, like he's
Tell
right.
us uneducated movie writers what plot pointing
Elijah, he mentions Elijah. So this is going to his name is going to come back again in the story.
Right.
And exactly what you just said is going to play out.
Okay.
Yeah.
A plot point is like a seed that's dropped that's going to refer to something later on. Is that what it is? Like, is that how you describe it?
Yeah, that's one way. Yeah.
Okay.
Plot point. And then, yes, integral parts of the story that you pick up on later on. Yeah.
You can kind of pull a thread on it later and build it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what he's going to do with Elijah. Yes.
Remember, because Jesus comes back and tells a story about Elijah.
Elijah, he does, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
and
then other people say, so Mark is actually really clever, feeding these things to us.
So you like Mark now?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. But it's warming on me, that's for sure. Look, my first time has gone off. We're still, all right, we're going to keep going. I'm trying to
We've
be
got to
shorter.
get to the 5,000 yet, haven't we?
Okay. So, but others say he's a prophet, just like the old times. And now he's back alive. And when you talk about the prophets like this, it sounds like there's some kind of, like they revere the old prophets.
Yes.
Even though Jesus even said, well, hey, or reminds them, you actually killed all the old prophets.
It's your crew that killed them. Yes,
now,
that's right.
posthumously, you guys love them and listen to them. Okay. So Herod wouldn't budge. It's John. Sure enough, I cut off his head and now he's back alive, because Herod was the one who had ordered the arrest of John, put him in chains and sent him to prison at the nagging of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. His brother Philip's wife? But isn't he married to Herodias?
That's the point.
Shock,
horror.
Family.
Dysfunctional
family. Yeah.
So what had happened is Herodias was married to Philip, who was also one of Herod the Great's sons. And for whatever reason, she decided she didn't want him anymore. She wanted a brother. And she started to shack up with Herod Antipas, not with Philip. And as a result of that, John the Baptist called him on it.
Right.
And said, you can basically marry her he basically told Herod, you can marry her when your brother's dead, but until your brother's dead, you can't marry her.
So
And
committing adultery.
is what he accused them of. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So Herodias, she was smouldering with hate.
Oh, smouldering with hate.
She wanted to kill him but didn't dare because Herod was in awe with John, in awe of John. Because he was convinced he was a holy man and he gave him special treatment in prison. And whenever he listened to him, he was miserable with guilt, yet he couldn't stay away. Something in John kept pulling him back.
Yeah.
I find that really interesting because Herod is so close to the gospel. You know, he's intrigued. And I see people like this in life, like they're interested. There's something that draws them back, but they just can't.
They can't cross the bridge.
Cross it.
Oftentimes it's because they can't turn on the things that they know, the things that's going to cause them to give up. I like this, but it's going to cost me too much. I'm going to have to give this up. So they just can't cross that bridge, and they're not prepared to pay the price, I suppose.
And Herod is like he's tormented. Imagine the dreams of this guy.
Yeah.
Like John the Baptist is back.
Yeah, that's
he's
right.
He's seeing ghosts.
He's
and
thinking,
figures.
this has got to be the same guy. Obviously, he felt tormented after he'd killed him.
Guilty.
Yep, that's
You're
right.
racked with guilt. So he's thinking this, and I'd say he'd be terrified, thinking John the Baptist is back.
Yeah, that's right. Come back to haunt me.
Yes, but here we have a portentous. That's the word. Portentous day arrived when Herod threw a birthday party, inviting all the brass and blue bloods in Galilee. His daughter, Herodias' daughter, so not his daughter, Herodias' daughter,
his stepdaughter,
does a terrific, beautiful, amazing dance for the guests.
and it was so well done. The whole thing was so well done in The Chosen.
Yeah, well, I'll have to watch it.
You'll have to watch it.
And she dazzled Herod and the guests. And this is really quite creepy, I think. But anyway, because, she would have been young, dancing anyway. This is 21st century lens. I'm looking through
Yes, it was
here.
even in The Chosen, it's a very seductive dance. She gets trained by Herodias' servant. The male servant is training her to the letter so she can dance and pull up right in front of his face and look really seductive, exactly like it would have been. So it's a very seductive dance that she's doing.
It sounds really weird if I then say, oh, I can't wait to watch that.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, I think it's the opening. I think it's pretty much the opening scene of the first episode. It's brilliant.
Okay, well, the king, he's blown away. He's mesmerized. And then he says, ask me anything. I'll give you anything you want. And carried away, he kept on. I swear I'll split my kingdom with you if you say so. I mean, she is very impressive.
Yeah.
She is also his niece.
She's his niece and his stepdaughter. That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Good call.
Oh.
Confusing family.
Days of our lives.
Yeah, days of our lives.
Yeah, she went back to her mother and said, what should I ask for? And her mother, who was smouldering with hate, says, ask for the head of John the Baptizer.
And not just that, other versions tell us on a silver platter.
On a silver platter. Look at the cultural difference here because that happens and she carries that head out to her mother and then what do they do?
Yeah, it's weird, hey?
Really disturbing. So we should have had trigger warnings on this one.
We should have, yeah.
But he says here he was sobered up, but the king was sobered up. He didn't want to do it, but he was unwilling to lose face. So he went and cut his head off. It's a real culture shock reading that. If I'd never read this before, particularly in this day of cancel culture, I would actually think, is the scripture painting this as something that should happen?
Right.
Like, is this the way life should be?
Yeah.
Because when you hear the scriptures tell the truth of the scriptures, that's how we should live by. It's like, well, should we live by this?
So it's a bit of a wait, what moment?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the scriptures tell the human story in all its funkiness, goriness, real life. It's the story of life, the story of hate, the story of sin. And you're not supposed to see that the story will dictate. This is not, Jesus is going to get very upset about hearing about this when he hears about John the Baptist being executed. So this just tells us that this is what human hatred is capable of. It's a what's the word I'm after? It's like a narrative. It's a commentary from the narrative without actually having to commentate the narrative. You're supposed to see implied in the story the fact that this is disgusting, this is wrong, and this is horrible.
It's a big reveal of his heart as well.
Of Herod's heart?
Herod's heart. That even though he loves hearing from John, and you might say he's close to hearing the message of the Messiah, he really only cares for himself.
Yeah. He can't go past his own comfort.
No. And his kingship. Yep. He desires to have this power and he won't give anything up
That's right.
for it. And Do you think that's what blocked him from recognizing Christ? Or
Well, I think that's a big part of it, is the fact he couldn't give up the past. He was too trapped in his ways. So to use our conversation from last time about the parable of the sower, maybe he was like the rocky, not the rocky path. He might have been the next level up where there was just a little bit of a hint there, but straight away the birds came and straight away the scorching wind. You might get a little seedling, and then it gets scorched. He's a bit like that.
And maybe he'd formed his own opinions without fact checking.
Yeah.
Maybe he just thought Jesus was this guy, like a freak, and I'm right.
Yeah, well, maybe Mark's gospel, I don't know, they all get confused in my mind, but it's not until the day of his execution that Herod does finally meet Jesus. He's been waiting all this time. Finally, he sees Jesus.
And he's here unwilling to investigate further. He goes and listens to John, but he's unwilling to look any further.
Yep.
I think that's a really good example of people too.
Yes, good Paul.
We're unwilling to investigate.
Yep.
Unwilling to find out who
this is all
Jesus
too hard.
is.
Just leave it. Yep.
Yeah.
And we see, and Jesus would often tell us, go below the surface, see what's really going on. Yeah. So I would encourage people to do that.
Yeah.
Definitely go below the surface. Don't just dismiss something. The whole purpose of this podcast is that there are these what moments in the scripture.
You did that so well.
And we need to go, what's all that about? And not just dismiss it as put it in the too hard basket, but dig below the surface and find out. There's something we can learn from these stories.
Let's keep digging.
Okay.
Continue on. From verse 30. The apostles then rendezvoused. It's such a good word in the Bible.
Good French word.
Yeah, with Jesus and reported on all they had done. So
there we go. I was talking about that. They'd
been out traveling and releasing demons.
Yep.
Jesus says, come off by yourself and let's take a break and get a little rest. Isn't that nice?
Oh, nice of Jesus to offer them that.
For there was constant coming and going. They didn't even have time to eat.
Now they are busy in the ministry.
Yeah. So Jesus didn't have time to eat. Now this is showing their development, right? Now they're so invested in what they're doing. The craziness that people thought about Jesus, maybe they're thinking about the disciples.
Yeah,
See, there you go.
Sense. Yeah, that's a good development, plot development.
Yes. So they get in the boat. There's a lot of boats in this, by the way.
It's the Sea of Galilee. There's boats everywhere.
And they went off for some R&R. I added that in, but I don't think you would have noticed to a remote.
No, it would have fitted perfectly with it.
Someone saw them going and the word got around. From the surrounding towns, people went out on foot running and got there ahead of them. When Jesus arrived, he saw this huge crowd, and at the sight of them, his heart broke. Like sheep with no shepherd they were. He went right to work teaching them, not healing them, it says here. And when the disciples thought this had gone on long enough, it was now quite late in the day, they interrupted. We're a long way out in the country and it's very late. Pronounce a benediction and send these folks off so they can get some supper. And then Jesus said, you do it. Fix some supper for them. And they replied, are you serious? You want us to go spend a fortune
wait, what?
on these people? Yeah. But Jesus was quite serious. How many loaves of bread do you have? And here it's a very similar story. Instead of feeding the 5,000, he feeds the 4,000. And it's pretty much the same. Jesus got down to...
This is the 5,000, Jeanie.
Oh, I've already gone ahead.
You've skipped ahead a couple of chapters.
Skipped ahead. All right, well,
This is the 5,000. This is the first time we're seeing this.
Oh, I had such a great thing to say about that.
Save it for the 4,000 because we'll do that in a couple of chapters' time.
Put it back in my brain.
Yep, wait for the 4,000. That's coming in a couple of chapters.
Oh, see, I'm just taking so long. I thought I was already there. I was so excited. Okay. So we haven't seen this story yet.
No, this is the first time we're seeing this story.
Oh, this just tells you how many times I've heard preaching on this story.
Yes.
They blend into one. Jesus got them all to sit down in groups of 50 or 100. They looked like a patchwork quilt of wildflowers spread out on the green grass. That's quite sweet. He took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, lifted his face to heaven in prayer, blessed, broke, and gave the bread to the disciples, and the disciples in turn gave it to the people. He did the same with the fish, and they all ate their fill. More than 5,000 were at the supper, and they gathered 12 loaves, 12 baskets of leftovers. Why did Jesus feed them food? Because they were hungry.
Yes.
Okay. It's got nothing else. Got anything to do with anything else?
Yes. Let me see what you're going to say.
No, I'm asking you.
No, I'm asking you. You don't know? I thought you'd have heaps of notes prepared. Yeah, go on, Jeanie. Hit us with it.
I was just wicking at him.
Oh, yeah. I thought I'm going to let Jeanie have all the glory here.
Oh, no, there's no glory because it's later that I mention that I might sound smart later on, but not in this point.
Why did Jesus feed them?
Yeah.
Why do you think he fed them?
Because he was nice.
Mm-hmm.
He understood their humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's compassion.
Compassion.
Yep.
I would never have used that word, but
I
should use that word.
Well, I think the word is actually compassion. Is actually the word appears in the original text. It actually says Jesus saw them and had compassion upon them. So it gives us an insight.
So they're sitting there, desperate to hear what he's saying, and he's healing them, and they're not going anywhere. They stay there for a while, right?
Yes. Yeah. Bearing in mind, remember, he was trying to find somewhere secluded, and the people found out where he was, and they came to him. And at that point, Jesus saw them and had compassion on them. Even though he was in the middle of his R&R, like you said, but he still saw a need, and his compassionate heart meant, I've got to do something about this. So he gave up his own desires, which is an important lesson for anyone in ministry. There'll be times, I'm all for R&R, but there'll be times when you put aside your R&R and your own desires for the sake of other people. He gave up his R&R and said, I'm moved by compassion for these people because they're like sheep without a shepherd. They have got no direction. They need me. And he began to teach them.
What interests me in this part is the question where Jesus asks, well, what do you have? What do you have?
What do you have in your hand?
Yeah. It's the idea of there's a small thing in their hands, but he's able to look up to heaven. Blessings come from above, and he multiplies what's in their hand.
So
even though they complain.
Even though they were still whinging about it. Yeah, okay, so he's showing compassion. Where else does what is in your hand appear in Scripture?
There was this guy called Moses.
Now you're talking.
Yes, Moses. And there's another one.
Is there another one?
I think so.
There could be. I was thinking of the Moses one.
All right, we'll just stay with
Specifically the Moses one. Yep, this whole lot, God says to Moses, he says, how am I going to do this miracle? And he says, what's in your hand? And he takes what's in his hand and turns it into something powerful. We talked about that last year on the podcast. That's the same principle. Jesus will come back to you and go, just give me what you got. You don't have to have 5,000, enough food for 5,000. You don't have to have enough of you to be what everyone around you needs you to be. But if you just give me what you've got, I will take it and multiply it, and it will become more fruitful than you could ever imagine. And Jesus asks that principle of all of us. What's in your hand? Just use, whether you've got little or a lot. It's the parable of the talents. It doesn't matter whether you've got 1 or 2 or 5 or 10. If you just use faithfully whatever you've been entrusted with, God will bless that. And he will commend the person with 1 talent if they turn it into 2. Or he'll commend the person with 10 if they turn it into 20. Because we are called just to be faithful with what's in our hand.
And it's like Jesus is saying, it's okay with what you've got.
Yes.
Because often in church life, people will say, I don't feel like I can do that job. I can't serve that way because I don't have enough to give. But this story is actually saying that's okay because Jesus will take care of
He's
everything.
The
you
multiplier.
bring what you have. He multiplies it.
That's right. I love this principle because this is a kingdom principle that is written into this story. Yes, it's obviously telling us that Jesus has authority over, creation, that he can multiply food. This is manna. This is the Passover analogy here, the breaking of bread. That's all Passover analogy. So there's lots of rich in Jewish symbolism here. But he's trying to illustrate, as well as having his authority, he's trying to illustrate a kingdom principle, which is come to me with what you've got. Open up your hands, use what you've got, and I will multiply it for effectiveness for others. And ultimately, it was about feeding others. All of us are called to bring our own loaves and our own fish, even if it's just 2 fish and a couple of loaves, bring it to God. God can multiply and feed other people with what you've got.
Did you notice the word green here? Spread out on the green grass?
No, I didn't, because it's not in this version.
It's not in that one? Yeah. Well, it's marking time.
Marking time.
Yeah. It's going to be relevant, right? When's it green?
When is it green?
When is grass green in Israel, since you've been there so much?
Yeah, when is grass? It's not very green in Israel unless it's heavily irrigated. But Israel is very dry.
But it's strange that it says it. It's making some weird point.
Okay.
What does it say in yours?
I think it just says grass. Give me. You feed them. How much bread do you have? Jesus took the 5 loaves. Then he said, Where does he sit
It's a
them
very
down?
fertile
Oh, yes, it does say
image.
green grass.
Yeah.
Wow, I've never seen that before.
It's a fertile image.
Yes.
Jesus sits them down in this fertile place with very little in their hands.
Yes.
And then it
Ooh,
grows.
I want to dig into that. Not
Yeah.
now. We haven't got time. But have you dug into that? That's really significant.
I did have a note on it, but I can't find it.
That's quite.
I think
For someone like Mark, who's quite light on for words, the fact that
Yes.
he described the grass as green has got to be intentional.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow. Nice.
It's
Okay. There's one for our listeners
It's
to
an
do a bit of
Easter
research.
egg.
It's an
An
Easter
Easter
egg.
egg.
Something to go hunting for.
Yes.
Yeah, there'll be some references to that.
All right.
Mm.
I'm interested to know what people think.
Yeah.
Okay, so here, as soon as the meal was finished in verse 45, Jesus insisted that disciples get in the boat again and go on ahead across to Bethsaida,
Bethsaida, yep.
Yeah, while he dismissed the congregation. So they go and he stays behind. After sending them off, he climbs a mountain to pray. He's often climbing mountains to pray.
He's often withdrawing to lonely places to pray. Yes,
He's
that's
got
correct.
to enjoy physical exercise.
Oh, yeah, he's a fit man.
Or
He's a
the view.
tecton. He's probably all of the others. Beautiful views around the mountains around Galilee, so it's always worth a hike up one of them.
He's going to the mountaintop to pray.
Yep.
Even though, does he pray in the valley much?
I don't know. Just says the other versions will say he often goes to with lonely places, but yeah, I mean, pretty much Sea of Galilee is pretty much surrounded by mountains, isn't it? So he would have gone up hills everywhere he went.
It just reminds me of somebody going up a mountain with their cell phone. You get a better signal to talk to God.
I'll get a bit closer.
Sorry.
I'll get a bit closer to heaven. Go up a mountain. Well, the whole idea of heaven being on the mountaintops is an ancient practice. Mind you, these mountains we're talking about here, these aren't big mountains. These are hills.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It mentions it a bit. Mark
does.
valued him going onto mountains.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
All right. Late at night, the boat was far out to sea, and Jesus was still by himself on land, and he could see from where he was.
Yeah, up the mountain, he would be able to see them.
The men struggling with the oars, and the wind having come up against them at about 4 o'clock in the morning. He certainly waits his time to go. Jesus came toward them, walking on the sea. Here's a funny line. He intended to go right by them. What does yours say there?
Yeah, intended to go past them. Yep.
Okay, but when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost. Herod is thinking Jesus is a ghost.
Yep.
Now they're thinking
thinking
Jesus
it's
is
a
a
ghost.
ghost. It's a ghost. Oh, yeah.
No, yeah,
And
it's a
screamed,
ghost. Yep.
scared out of their wits. There's these fishermen on a boat, scared out of their wits, even though they'd seen all this demonic freedom of demons and all this stuff. They're terrified of this ghost.
Yeah, and these guys are fishermen. They're used to being on the lake and they're used to storms.
Yeah.
This is a demonically inspired storm. This is over and above the normal storms.
But they're scared out of their wits by the
Yep.
ghost, not the storm.
Not the storm.
Okay. Jesus was quick to comfort them. Courage, it's me. Don't be afraid. As soon as he climbed into the boat, the wind died down. They were stunned, shaking their heads, wondering what was going on. They didn't understand what he had done at the supper. None of this had yet penetrated their hearts. And I've added here, who is this man?
Yeah, that's right. Well, you've added that.
No, that's my thought.
Well,
yeah.
that's your
Who
added
is
bit, but
this
that's
man?
coming from other scriptures. The other versions of this story where Jesus calms the storm, it doesn't really talk about calming the storm here, does it? Unless it's a different story. He's not really calming.
No,
no mention
it
of
just
a storm
calms
here.
when he gets into
Yeah.
the boat.
Calms when he gets in the boat. But yes.
This is now the second time he's calmed the storm.
Okay, yes. We did read it previously, didn't
Yeah.
we? Yes, that's right. That's right. It was in the previous story where they said, who is this man? Yep.
Okay, so they
Correct.
didn't worry about him not calming the storm. They
It was
just
more that he was walking on the water.
walking on the water.
yeah.
This he intended to go right by them. It makes
interesting.
me it makes me think how often in my life,
Yes.
and I'm not really speaking personally here, but how often in our lives, I should say, have we been in a moment and we don't know this, but Jesus is trusting us in the moment. He thinks we're going to get it. He thinks we're going to be okay. Even though we're scared, we should have the faith that things are going to work out. And so he intends to just go by at a distance and watch us. But instead, he can see from a distance that our fear has risen.
Mm-hmm.
And so he changes his path to get into the boat with us.
Sounds like compassion.
Yeah. It is compassion, but it implies that the relationship with Christ is so much closer than what you think it is.
Yeah. Yes, that we might think he's distant and aloof when he's perhaps walking by, but if we cry out to him, it reminds me the scripture says, if you cry out to me, if you seek me with all your heart, you will find me.
Because even though I read here and I'm surprised, he intended to go right by them, that isn't actually surprising, because I would say most people would say they feel like Jesus is walking
Yes,
right
it's
by
more
them,
surprising that he stopped and
gets in the boat,
attended to them.
changes his mind.
Yeah, and I think that's the heartbeat that Mark's wanting us to get, is that Jesus will go out of his way to enter into our world if we will, even if it's just to cry out, God, I'm afraid right now. I need you. That's often enough just to engage Jesus' heart.
Yeah, so not who is this guy that calms the storm, but who is this guy that gets in the boat with me?
Like it.
Yeah.
It's a good thought,
tick,
Jeanie.
tick, tick.
2 ticks for that one.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So they beached the boat at Gennesaret, whatever, and tied up at the landing. As soon as they got out of the boat, word got around fast. People ran this way and that, bringing their sick on stretchers to where they thought he was. Wherever he went, village or town or country crossroads, they brought their sick to the marketplace and begged him to let them touch the edge of his coat. That's all. And whoever touched him became well. Why do we have no personal story there when we had the personal story in previous chapters about the woman who touches him? This just shows how significant the woman who touches him, that story was, because there's no mention here of anybody else.
No, I think that's not the purpose of this story.
Oh, what is?
This is the purpose of this story, is that this is the same place where last time he showed up on the other side of the lake, he healed the demoniac we talked about in the last episode. This is his second visit to the same place.
Oh, was that Gennesaret?
Gennesaret, yeah.
Say it again.
Gennesaret.
Okay.
The valley of the region of the Gerasenes, the versions say. But it's basically the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee, the region of the Decapolis, the 10 Gentile towns are over that side. Not a place that Jews went to generally. So Jesus went over there last time, healed the demon-possessed man. He wanted to go with him. He said, no, go back and tell everyone what you've done. Jumps in the boat and goes straight back again. This is the next time recorded he goes back. And his response last time, remember, was the people were afraid of the pigs and everything else. They kicked him out. He goes back there sometime later, and now they're running to him. And the only difference is that that man has changed them by his story. He has told them about everything Jesus has done for them, and now they are ready for him. They hear, this is the one who set the demoniac free. And they come seeking healing from him.
And it's a really good example of they've seen the evidence of that madman healed.
Yep.
The word madman is what they use.
That's what they use, yeah.
Word. And they have seen that evidence, and here you see people, or the question, how will you respond to that evidence?
Yeah. It actually is not that different to how the chapter began with Nazareth. How will you respond? They responded in disbelief. These people now, last time they responded in disbelief, this time the people are responding in faith.
Yeah.
So I think this is a direct link. The question throughout all this chapter is, how will you respond to
And
Jesus?
Jews in the beginning and
Now Gentiles.
Gentiles.
Yep, that's right.
So even though Jesus says later on, we're going to get to it, the food is, the crumbs are for my people at the table and not the dogs underneath or whatever. That's not actually what he's showing. No.
He is demonstrating that the good news is for Jew and Gentile.
He's making big effort to go to the Gentile.
Yep, absolutely he is.
So remember that when we come up to the next part.
We're going to see that a few times repeated. Yeah.
Let's go to the next chapter.
All right, number 7.
Chapter 7 is a lot shorter than chapter 6.
Is it?
Yeah,
okay.
it is.
All right.
Chapter 6 was a long chapter.
Yeah, it was. There's about 4 stories in chapter 6.
Okay. This one is the source of your pollution. That's what it's titled here in mine. And here we have the Pharisees in verse 1, along with some religion scholars, that's what it says, who had come from Jerusalem, gathered around him. And they noticed that some of the disciples weren't being careful with ritual washing before meals. The Pharisees, Jews in general, in fact, would never eat a meal without going through the motions of a ritual hand washing, with an especially vigorous scrubbing if they had just come from the market. To say nothing of the scourings they'd give jugs and pots and pans.
Love the way Eugene puts it.
The Pharisees asked Jesus, "Why do your disciples flout the rules, showing up at meals without washing your hands?" Jesus answered, "Isaiah was right about frauds like you. Hit the bullseye, in fact. These people make a big show of saying the right thing, but their heart isn't in it. They act like they're worshipping me, but they don't mean it. They just use me as a cover for teaching whatever suits their fancy, ditching God's command and taking up the latest fads." Tell me about this hand washing. What is this?
It is part of the Jewish tradition. The what's it called? The Talmud. It's the oral tradition that was based on the Mosaic law. So what they did is over the preceding centuries ahead, basically after they come back from the exile, they were so careful. They wanted to become so careful that they wouldn't go into idolatry again, that they set up all these oral rules, traditions, Jesus calls them, traditions that were based on oral law, but they built, I think we talked about it previously, they built fences around fences around fences so that they wouldn't break the law. And some of those things were these traditions, like you have to do a ceremonial washing of your hands before every meal. The Mosaic law didn't command that. That was just something that they had done, perhaps rightly originally with the intention of exactly that, trying to protect themselves so that they could actually stay pure of heart. But somewhere along the way, over that period of time, it went from a purity of heart to them viewing the purity as the act itself. In other words, if you do this act, you're pure. And if you don't do this act, you're impure. You're a lawbreaker. You're outside of God's will. So the actual religious tradition, the religious act became the thing of significance. Christians still do this today. We think of going to church or doing certain ritual things or saying the Our Father 5 times or whatever, as though those acts themselves are the thing that make us righteous, the good work that makes us righteous. And that's what these guys had fallen into that. And that's what Jesus is going to wind the clock back on here, because they're accusing him of being lawbreakers because they're actually breaking tradition. And Jesus is going to go, guys, you missed the point. The tradition isn't that important. What's going on inside your heart that matters.
So the more you wash, the more righteous you look.
That's right. The more righteous you look, or the more righteous they actually thought they were.
Yeah, and the more righteous people believed you to be.
Yes, all of those.
Okay, so you stand there for 10 minutes and somebody...
Oh, what a holy person you are.
And then the next person is 11 minutes. It could get quite competitive.
It could get quite competitive, and which is called self-righteousness.
Self-righteousness.
Yeah, exactly.
So tradition seems to be everything for the Pharisees.
Yes, and I used to think, it's all bad, but as I studied, I realised, no, there was some good reasons for these oral traditions originally. It's just that they missed the point.
Because doesn't the Mosaic law say only priests need to wash? The priests needed to wash before they went into the temple. Before they went into the temple, and that's where all of this came from.
Yeah, exactly. And they've built upon the Mosaic law up to this constrictive tradition. Jesus will say things to the Pharisees like, you're weighing these people down with rules that you can't even fulfill yourself. And as you're saying, that the rules are what's making people righteous. And these rules are so exhaustive and so controlling that really it puts the power in the hands of the few elite people who have control over whether or not whether you're breaking the rules or not.
So they've basically created religion from a bar of soap.
Yes, I like it. Did you have that in your notes or did you just come up with that? Religion from a bar of soap.
I just came up with that.
That's nice. Yeah, I like that.
And this is what Jesus is attacking.
Yes.
He comes out quite severely against religion.
This is not gentle Jesus right here.
These people make a big show of saying the right thing, but their heart isn't in it. So he's basically saying that no amount of bar of soap cleaning is going to be enough. The real problem is your heart.
Yep.
It's a very wise thing to say.
Well, it makes a lot of sense when we stop and think about it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Surely it's what goes on inside us that matters. And yet, while we think about that, we still fall back into legalism. We all fall back into, if I just listen to every minute of every episode of the Bible What Wait podcast, then I'll be a real Christian.
That is true, by the way.
Well, you would be actually because not many people listen to every episode of this podcast. But, if I just do that, if I just read my Bible once a year, I'll be a real Christian. If I just pray for 10 minutes a day, I'll be a real Christian. Even though it starts with an intention of I want to do the right thing, it quickly we'll do this again this year when we do Galatians later in the year. It's quickly morphs into legalism. Jesus is constantly cutting at that, going, that's not right. You can't think that way.
So they would make a big show. They're very clean. They're great people. But Jesus goes on and he says in verse 9 to 13, I think, you get rid of God's command so you won't be inconvenienced in following the religious fashions. Moses said, then he talks about something. He goes like off tangent here.
Okay.
Slightly.
Show where he's going.
We've gone from hand washing to Moses saying, respect your father and mother. He's using this as an example.
That's correct.
Yep, and anyone denouncing father or mother should be killed. But you weasel out of that by saying that it's perfectly acceptable to say to father or mother, gift, what I owed you, I've given as a gift to God, thus relieving yourselves of obligation to father or mother. You scratch out God's word and scrawl a whim in its place. You do a lot of things like this.
I love it. Well done, Eugene.
I got nothing to say.
Okay, so, well, I think it's probably worth taking a moment and just reiterating some of the stuff we've done on previous episodes last year about the law. The law is Torah. The word means instruction. So this is a good example Jesus is using. He's going, the Torah says, it's in the 10 Commandments, honor your mother and father, right? And so what they have done is they have taken the tradition and they have gone, okay, well, look, if you actually give that money to the church and you dismiss your mother and father, you're actually not a lawbreaker. Because, you're giving money to the church. Using a 21st century language, that's pretty much what he was saying there. And Jesus was actually saying, look, the 10 Commandment that says honor your mother and father, it goes beyond this. It deals with the heart issue. If your heart is to honor your mother and father, you will be generous toward them. You will, especially in this culture where, there was no pensions, there was no Centrelink, there was no superannuation. Elders relied on their children to provide for them. So it was horrible. They would be left high and dry with nothing if they didn't have their children honouring them. And Jesus is trying to point to that and go, look below the surface. When you see Torah, don't just say it's a rule that you can tick. Look at the heart of what's trying to be said there. And clearly Jesus is saying that's the problem.
So they were twisting scripture.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is they were saying in there's a word and you might remember this word because it was their responsibility and obligation to look after their parents. Mm-hmm. But instead, if
Corbin?
Yes,
Corbin.
Yes, Corbin.
Yep,
that's what
top
it's
of my
called.
Head. That's what it's called. Yep.
But they say, hey, I can't sell this block of land because it belongs to God.
Yes.
It doesn't belong to me, mother and father. I can't look after you. I've given it to God.
That's right.
That was their way of bending it to actually keep the wealth themselves.
They wanted to keep it for themselves.
And not have the responsibility. Yep. And they would have felt quite justified.
They would have justified because I'm giving to God. And God's going, hey, I don't need your money. I need your heart.
I need your heart.
Yes.
Look after your family.
Look after your family. Exactly right.
So this would have been quite chastising. They would have known it, but they would never have admitted to it.
And it wasn't that they actually wanted to give the money to God. They actually wanted to keep it for themselves. That was the thing. They wanted glory from it. It's almost like, you wanted to make it very obvious that you were giving all this money. Make a big show and song and dance of how much money you're giving so people could praise you. Jesus says elsewhere, when you do that, Jesus says that's all the reward you're ever going to get.
And here he goes on to say, Jesus calls the crowd together and he says to them, listen now, all of you, take this to heart. Pay attention when he says listen. It's not what you swallow that pollutes your life, it's what you vomit.
Ooh,
that's
comes
the
out.
real
what you vomit.
Pollution. It's very graphic.
Yes, it is.
When he was back home after being with the crowd, his disciples said, we don't get it.
We don't get it. We still don't get it. Wait, what?
Yeah, get in line. We don't get it now either. That's the real pollution. Oh, no, wait. Put it in plain language. And Jesus says, are you being willfully stupid? Don't you see that what you swallow can't contaminate you? Which some people then say from this verse, it's okay to eat everything.
Well, it's actually going to say it in a minute.
Yes. It does. Okay.
Yep,
it doesn't enter your heart, but your stomach works. It doesn't enter your heart, but your stomach works its way through the intestines and is finally flushed. That took care of dietary quibbling. Jesus was saying that all foods are fit to eat. He went on, it's what comes out of a person that pollutes. Obscenities, lusts, thefts, murders, adulteries, greed, and there's a long list. But basically all of these are vomit from the heart There is the source of your pollution.
Yeah. That is the best commentary on what Torah is supposed to be that I've ever seen anywhere.
Really?
Oh, just because the Torah was supposed to be an instruction that would actually illuminate what was going on inside our heart. Not that it would be a tick box that if we ticked them, we were righteous. It was supposed to show us that, look, you're actually fighting against this nature all the time that wants to do the opposite of this. You want to have envy, slander, pride, deceit, all that sort of stuff that it lists there. I love this because it's Jesus setting right the Torah. This is like, little statement here is like Jesus' version of Matthew 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Mount. You've heard it was said this. I'm going to show you what it really means.
Do you think the disciples got it?
I don't know whether they fully got it. I don't think any of us ever fully get it, but I think we can learn. But I think while there's still brokenness in us, we will constantly default back to the outward, not the inward.
I've got a question for you. It says here, it's what comes out of a person that pollutes.
Mm-hmm.
But at first it has to go in.
Mm-hmm.
So we take it, like, I'll just pick one here.
You don't take it in through your mouth.
No, well, let's just say obscenities. Let's pick the word obscenities, right?
Yep.
If it comes out of me, it means that I must have heard it at some point, taken it on board, and agreed that it was okay, and then it settles in my heart, and then it comes out as a part of me. That's
it becomes part of us and comes out.
Part of us.
I wonder if that's what Jesus meant in the Sermon on the Mount, where he says the eye is, your eye is the window. What does he say? Your eye
is the window to your soul.
No, that's not the saying. He says, but he says, if your eye is good, your whole life will be full of light. But if your eye is evil, your whole life will be full of wickedness. And he's talking there about, so watch what, he's basically saying, so watch what goes in. Because what goes in through the eyes and the ears is going to be more important than what goes in through the food that you eat in your mouth, is the point he's trying to make. They thought that the food going in through the mouth was what made them clean or unclean. And Jesus is saying, no, it's what's going through your eyes, what you're processing in your mind, going into your heart, settling those things you're talking about, those obscenities, the things you see, the things you think about, you dwell on. That's actually what defiles the heart.
Okay, so to sum this up, to put it in a perspective that I might understand, if I was in this culture and I was just a rich person and I'm seeing the Pharisees scrubbing their hands and everything, and I start to think that's how I get clean. So I start to mimic their actions. And therefore that becomes a part of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, if I see them doing this Corban, is that the word
Yep.
it was? Yeah.
Then I start doing that.
And it's acceptable to them and they're godly people, and then I start doing it, and then somehow that corruption becomes a part of me, and my heart is now corrupted.
Yep.
Is that what this is saying? Did I get that right?
No, I think it's a really good example of it. Jesus calls them, elsewhere he'll say that the Pharisees are blind guides. He says if a blind man leads another blind man, they'll both fall into a pit. And he's rebuking them because he's saying, you guys claim that you can see and you're blind, and now you are teaching others and they are suffering from your teaching. Therefore, you're guilty of a greater crime than they are because you're supposed to be instructing them.
This isn't saying, just thinking, we always talk about a battle of good and evil in life. That's just part of being alive. But it's not really saying that, is it? It's saying that we're viewing things and we accept them and we take them on board, and then it becomes a part of us.
Yes.
There's no battle. The battle is already won.
Yeah, it's about changing your thinking. It's about recognizing the battle is won, but we still have a responsibility to guard our hearts. Proverbs says, guard your heart, for out of it flow the issues of life, the wellspring of life. So our responsibility as Christians is to guard what goes in, because then that will determine what will come out.
Yes, okay. That's good. That's what
you were trying to say?
Trying to say in a roundabout way, getting to the point.
Guard your heart.
Guard your heart. And that's why I really love the language and the aggressive tone of Jesus here.
Oh, you like this, yes.
Yeah, and just the attack, but it's such a clear attack.
This is one of the few things that Jesus gets really mad about. He gets really mad when people who are supposed to be leaders and influencers for good are actually abusing their power for their own gain. And I'm glad Jesus gets angry about that, because that's unjust.
All right, moving on. So from there, in verse 24, from there Jesus set out for the vicinity of Tyre. Where's that?
It's in Lebanon. It's actually up on the Mediterranean coast, probably from Galilee, Well, Galilee to the Galilee region, if he's near the lake, it's a couple of days' walk, probably 3 or 4 days' walk. It's a decent hike.
All right.
Up to Tyre. It's a Mediterranean coastal town.
No boating.
Oh,
walking.
Walking to get there. No boat
right.
to get there. But when you get there, there's plenty of boating. It's the Mediterranean.
Okay.
Tyre was the capital city of that whole region. It was in ancient times.
Boats, didn't it?
Oh, yes, it was known for its boats.
Yeah.
This is the king of Tyre that is rebuked in Isaiah 14, I think it is, or Ezekiel 28. This was a major trade route. This was one of the biggest trade centres of the world, and it was very well known for its, and still is, for its holiday destination and so on. It's a beautiful area.
I'll take your word for it.
I haven't been to Lebanon, but it's that area, yeah.
Okay.
Basically, here's what Jesus is doing. You know, he was trying to go for a holiday, a bit of R&R before.
Yeah.
He went up into the mountain. He couldn't get away. So he's done his feeding of the 5,000. He's done his ministry, and now he's going, fellas, we need a real holiday. Let's go to the beach.
Yeah.
Basically, let's go to the beach. And he takes a long not many people are going to follow him all that way. It's a long way.
So he's gone to R&R to get away from all the people and spread the word. But he enters a house there where he didn't think he would be found. But he couldn't escape notice. How did he not know he would be found?
I think he's probably just assuming he's so far away.
Okay, so sometimes Jesus has this connection to the Spirit where he knows things, and other times he doesn't.
Yeah, I think he's not going around knowing everything. I think he's part of his humanness is that he just has to go through life like the rest of us. Sometimes he'll get a word of knowledge for a specific purpose, like the woman at the well. He knows I've got to go there, or I've got to go across the Sea of Galilee to get to the demoniac, but that's supernatural spirit-filled for a purpose. Most of the time, Jesus is just like the rest of us, just working his way through life, figuring things out. Otherwise, he wouldn't be truly human.
Because it's hard to read this when you hear that he's the Son of God, and then he enters a house where he didn't think he would be found.
Okay, yeah. I'm much more comfortable with going, that's just Jesus as in his humanity. He didn't know everything in his humanity. He gave up his all-knowing.
He gave up, and what did you call it? Kenosis?
The kenosis.
Kenosis, which is the giving up of
the emptying, actually.
Emptying?
The emptying of his divine attributes.
All right, so he empties his divine attributes, but he has the voice of the Holy Spirit in his ear. Is that how I should think of it?
Yeah, let's go with that. Yeah, he hears the Holy Spirit. He's filled with the Holy Spirit. So what Jesus does when he goes around, Acts 10:38 says, God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Spirit, and he went around doing good and healing all those who were under the power of the enemy. Jesus operated as a Holy Spirit-filled human, as opposed to the Son of God himself. So when he ministered, when he got words of knowledge like that, he was doing what we can do. He was doing that through the power of the Spirit. He had emptied himself of his access to his own divinity. He had willingly given that up so that he could now be a human being fully able to represent us, who is inspired, empowered by the Spirit of God.
Okay. So then, if he's fully human like us, and when he left Earth and he gave us the Holy Spirit, are you saying that we should have the same abilities that he has? Or we could do the same things that he has? Yeah.
We can do the things that Jesus did as a Spirit-filled man. This is why we just read about him delegating his authority to his disciples. He gave them this authority to do these miracles. He'll say, hey, you know what? He'll say in John's Gospel, he'll say, you'll be able to do greater things than me, is what he's saying there. There's a designation, a transfer of authority, Spirit-filled authority to his followers, and now we can go out and we can replicate what Jesus has done. It's a huge, audacious claim, but if you think about it, it's the original claim in Genesis. Partner with me, rule the earth, subdue the earth, steward the earth. That's what he's calling us to do. Do what we were always supposed to do.
It's an extraordinary claim.
Yeah, until you realize that was actually God's intention for humanity. It's just that we fell short of that. But if we can grasp, this is actually what God wants humanity to be. He wants us to be his partners on the earth. Then it would stand to reason that we are the ones to bring his kingdom values to earth.
So he desires for us not to just live in the natural, but to be connected to the supernatural, spiritual.
Yes.
So that we're able to do supernaturally spiritual
things. Kingdom things, yes. Yes.
Who is this man?
Who is
what
this
is
man?
going on here? This just sounds so strange. It does. It really does. All right, keep going. We can talk about that for a long time.
Sure, go for
So
it.
he was barely inside this house when a woman who had a disturbed daughter heard where he was. She came and knelt at his feet, begging for help. And the woman was Greek, Syro-Phoenician by birth, and she asked him to cure her daughter. And he said, "Stand in line and take your turn. The children get fed first. If there's anything left over, the dogs get it."
Gentle Jesus.
Yeah, and she said, "Of course, master. But don't dogs under the table get scraps dropped by their children?" At this point, you almost want to close your
Yeah,
you
it
just
almost
want to
seems too
shut the whole
confronting,
thing
doesn't
down.
it? Who do you think you are, Jesus? How dare you call this woman a dog?
This is such a strange thing because you've shown he's been loving, he's been kind, he's healed women, he's healed children, and then here's this woman practically begging, and he's like, "Yeah, nah, get in line." And it makes me think, because Mark is using culture and he's using things to tell this story, could that statement possibly have been some kind of parable or saying that they said at that time? Was he just using something like a saying she was familiar with? I know there's no answers to that.
No, well, actually, I had forgotten that, but I have a vague feeling, I've read that somewhere, that there is a statement or something. It's not the common thing I would interpret it as, but just the fact you say that, I wonder if there was a common statement. You don't have any record of that?
No, I didn't look that up. No.
What I learned in Bible college was that this is not that uncommon for Jesus. He seems to, at first instance, we've just read about him walking past. You often see he with blind Bartimaeus and the blind men, he often goes straight past them. And it seems like he's disinterested. In this case, he's sort of pushing her away, and it appears like he's being callous. But what he's actually trying to do is he's trying to provoke a faith response in the woman. Like when Jesus appears before a leper falls at his feet, or the blind people fall at his feet, one of the first things Jesus says quite often is, "What do you want me to do for you?" I mean, what do you mean what you want me to do for you, Jesus? I'm blind. I can't see. What do you expect me to say? But he still wanted to elicit that. Solicit. Not elicit. Solicit. Let's keep it G-rated. Solicit that faith response, and that's what he's doing with this woman. It's fascinating. On one hand, he's actually saying, "Look, the children, Israel, the children, you're basically a dog. You're a scraps under the table kind of person." And it seems like he's pushing her away. But in the language, there's also an there's also an invitation, because the word used for dog there is actually puppy. It's not the growling, dirty dog. It softens it a little bit. Okay, it's a little baby dog. It's a little so it softens it a little bit. Still, I'm not sure it's quite the same, but it's like there's a little breadcrumb there, pun intended, that he's giving to her, because he's trying to solicit that response in her, and she comes back with the response. She goes, "I don't need the whole loaf. Just a crumb will be enough for me, Jesus. I just need a crumb. I'll take anything you've got." And it's that response that you haven't read it yet, but it's that response that Jesus is so attracted to, that he says she's got. Doesn't he say she's got great faith?
Mine says Jesus was impressed. "You're right. On your way. Your daughter is no longer disturbed. The demonic affliction is gone." She went home and found her daughter relaxed on the bed. The torment gone for good. Okay. Yeah, it says good answer. It says in this version, the demon has left her daughter. I actually think that other versions will say that this is where he has, the Greek says megapistis. Megapistis. Right. Pistis is the word for faith, and mega is the word for great. And so, there's only, if I'm correct, there's only 2 times when Jesus refers to people having megapistis. Yes. And yeah, you're right. That? Yep. This story and the story of the centurion's son who is sick, and Jesus, he comes to Jesus and says, "You don't even need to come near my house." It's this they're both Gentiles, they're not Jews, which is partly why they've got megapistis, because they shouldn't be normally accepted faith. And Jesus says, he'll say things like, "I haven't even seen this kind of faith anywhere in Israel. This is megapistis." Yep. And he says that over this woman, because
even though he tried to push her away, she pushed through and said, like the woman who wrestled through the crowd in our last episode, I'm going to touch his cloak. That's what she's doing here.
And, there's also the possibility that it was funny.
Yes, it could have been funny.
It could have been funny.
It could have been. He could have been doing it with a bit of a joke.
It's out of context for us. We don't get it. It could have been the same.
He could have been doing it with
funny.
a smirk on his face.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, you don't really belong here, Yeah.
And he's appealing to her intelligence.
Yeah.
She responds with a witty answer.
Yeah, she gives a great answer, doesn't she? Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, he treats her like a real person.
Yeah.
Whereas he could have just brushed her off
He
as
could
a
have brushed her off, which is what the disciples wanted him to do.
But we have this moment in here that has sparked thousands of years of conversation.
Yes.
No one can quite understand it or get it right. But I'm trying to look at it like a saying or a joke. And when I do that, it really opens it up.
It does. If Jesus was being a little bit facetious, a little bit sarcastic, a little bit joking around, that's quite a valid interpretation, because we don't have that knowledge ahead of us. We're very looking at English translations. Maybe there's hints in the Greek. I don't know. But I've never seen it anywhere translated saying, Jesus responded sarcastically or half jokingly. It just seems like it just tells us this is how he said it.
Is it in other books?
I've never, might have been you who told me this one other time that you'd seen it that way, because I don't think I'd ever seen it as a potential sarcastic comment. But that might have been because I had been conditioned through my education in Bible college to see it as what I just described as this kind of brash answer that's intended to solicit a response. But even if it is a bit sarcastic, it's still trying to get that same response out of her.
Because even when he says he's impressed, it sounds like you say the joke, someone comes back with a witty comment, they're like, whoa,
good, touche,
yeah.
And it could be that. I just have never thought about it like that before. I'd have to study it to find out. The point, though, is that she pushed through any potential offence and kept at Jesus for faith.
And in the tone of the book's tone is very serious. So
it is. Mark's tone is very serious. It would be unusual for Mark to he doesn't show the humorous side of Jesus as much.
No, but maybe he is. Maybe
he is
that's
there.
His funny.
Yep. It could be. That could be about as funny as Mark gets.
Yeah.
He's obviously a dark character of some kind or other. I mean, the fact that it all got too hard and he left Paul and Barnabas alone and headed back home again. Maybe he was a glass half empty kind of guy.
But notice here at Jesus' words, this girl is healed.
Yes.
I don't know the distance, how far she was from home, but at his word, she was healed.
That's right.
This woman did have megapistis.
She did.
Yeah. So after this, he leaves the region of Tyre and he goes back through Sidon, back to Galilee, and over to the district of the 10 towns.
So here he is, the third visit to the Decapolis.
Third visit to the 10 towns. Some people brought a man who could neither hear nor speak and asked Jesus to lay a healing hand on him. He took the man off by himself, put his fingers in the man's ears and some spit on the man's tongue. Then Jesus looked up in prayer, groaned mightily and commanded, Ephphatha.
Ephphatha.
Open up. And it happened. This man's hearing was clear and his speech plain, just like that. Jesus urged them to keep it quiet, but they talked it up all the more, beside themselves with excitement. He's done it all and well. He gives hearing to the deaf, speech to the speechless.
It's interesting here. Jesus is telling him to keep it quiet. Remember how we were saying Jesus was always telling the Jews to keep it quiet, but he was quite happy for the demoniac to go and tell everyone. But maybe it's gotten to the point where the Gentiles are so on board now that he goes, the last thing I'm going to have is even more people showing up.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. But
I hadn't thought that before.
I don't know what the reason is for that, because this is a Gentile man.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I assume. Yeah.
I've always wondered about this, sort of a strange thing. If he could heal the daughter by word at distance, why does he have to put his fingers, and why would he do that?
Why would he put spit on his tongue and all that sort of stuff? Yeah. Well, I always say that, there's as many instances of Jesus spitting on people as there is laying hands on them to heal them. So we probably should spit on every second person at the healing altar call.
No.
I don't think so.
Oh,
yes, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, other than it just seems like God doesn't do the same thing the same way all the time. And even in the Old Testament, his deliverance it's not a one-size-fits-all. Sometimes he delivers through sending out the choir ahead of everybody else. Sometimes he delivers through, lepers at the city gate and a sound of marching in the trees. God's just as varied in his deliverance as he is in how many different plants and animals he makes. He's just very vast in that. And this seems to be an example of that. There's no explanation as to why he spits or why he says things or.
I think there is.
Okay, come on, tell me why. I'm ready to learn.
I think Jesus works according to our situation. So, for example, here, and it's pretty obvious.
The tongue and the ears.
Okay, who is this guy? Not Jesus, but the man he's healing. What's his problem?
He's deaf and dumb.
Yeah. So do you think he's going to hear if Jesus says, hear this message and be saved and healed?
Yep, that's right. So
can't
he's
hear.
accommodated.
Yes.
Yes, that's a brilliant answer. He has to touch his ears and he has to touch his tongue because that's the things that he's healing.
Yes.
Yep.
So he's completely responding to the man in the moment. And if the man had just heard, be healed, well, he didn't hear it. But if he suddenly is healed and he can hear now, he didn't hear the command to be healed.
Yep. No, that's great.
So
makes a lot of sense.
Jesus touches his ears, the very problem. He goes straight to the problem.
Goes to the problem. I like it. So when he heals the man with leprosy, he reaches out and touches him because that's what he needed. When he heals the man who can't walk, he says, pick up your mat and walk. He meets people where they're at and touches their need, their felt need.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's not for the people watching.
Yeah, great.
Because he could have just said,
Thank
be
you,
healed,
Jeanie.
and they hear it. But in the difference with the little girl who had died and he resurrected her, she didn't know any of that.
No.
She was just asleep and suddenly she's awake and everybody's like, oh, he did this amazing miracle. But this guy here gets the touch. Jesus doesn't say anything for anybody to hear.
No, this is just, he's on his own with this guy.
Pulls this guy aside.
Yeah.
Touches him. Does
Jeanie, that is
thing.
so good. That warrants a lot more thought because I don't think I've ever thought about the fact that the variety of Jesus' healings are contingent upon the need of the person to the degree that you've just said. That's great. Even with John, when he brings Lazarus back from death, he calls Lazarus out of the tomb, but he says, "Father, thank you that you hear me. I know that you've always heard me, but I say this for the benefit of those around me." He's always doing what he's doing for the purpose of those around him or the person he's healing, not because he needs it or there's some one size fits all. I reckon that's food for thought.
Food for thought.
Yeah.
As is the word that he uses here.
Ephphatha.
And it's only used another time, once in the Bible, Isaiah 35:56.
Isaiah 30. Would I look that up? Yeah, sure. Isaiah 35. It's Aramaic, isn't it?
I'm actually not sure.
So whenever you see Jesus quoting a different version, a different language, it's because the Bible, the New Testament is written in Greek and it's quoting Aramaic. When Jesus says, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani on the cross, that's Aramaic. When Jesus says, Talitha kum to the little girl, we read in the last week, he's saying, he's speaking in Aramaic, which is it's their language of the day. That's what the Jews spoke. It's their native language at the time. They didn't speak Hebrew at this time. They spoke Aramaic. Isaiah 35, what is it?
35:5-6.
35:5-6. And when he comes, he will open the eyes of the blind, unplug the ears of the deaf. The lame will leap like a deer. Those who cannot speak will sing for joy. Springs will gush forth in the wilderness and streams will be in the wasteland. Love it.
So he says that word, which is in there.
Ephphatha, yeah.
But it actually, then the next sentence, or the next couple of sentences, the people actually confirm it. So Jesus is pointing back to Isaiah and about a prophecy of himself.
Yep.
And then the people around say, well, he gives hearing to the deaf and speech to the speechless.
So who is this man?
Who is this
I
man?
get to say at that time.
Yeah.
That's right. So this is actually a reference to an Old Testament messianic prophecy. And it's saying really clearly, it's kind of showing you this is the one that you've been waiting for. Who is this man?
Yeah.
I love it.
So Mark is like plot pointing, pulling you back, all sorts of stuff going on in this little section.
Yeah, great.
Here.
That's good. I'm learning. Thank you, Jeanie.
Me too. Let's move on. Mark 8.
Mark 8.
Here we are.
Shout out to Johnny, who's at home, who Jeanie just said I feel bad for him because he hasn't got anything to eat. Is that what you were saying?
I didn't say that. I said the kids are homesick today.
Oh, the kids are
and
homesick today. Oh, yeah.
He's got nothing to eat.
He's doing daddy daycare again.
You know what? If Jesus ever comes to you, it's almost like he has to lay hands on your ears because you clearly did not hear what I just said.
No, I didn't hear you say that. I cut you off before that.
Oh, dear.
Well, look, just read this passage out to Johnny. It says,
right.
Jesus feeds the 4,000. It says,
4,000
maybe you could feed your 4 kids.
Get to it, man.
Okay,
Right.
come on.
Okay, about this time, Jesus again found himself with a hungry crowd on his hands. People are always hungry for Jesus or hungry around Jesus.
Yep.
Yeah. So he called his disciples together and said, "This crowd is breaking my heart. They've stuck with me for 3 days and now they have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they'll faint along the way. Some of them have come a long distance." And his disciples responded, "How do you..." Sorry.
What were you going to do there? Come on, do it.
Dramatize.
Do it. Get your practicing. You're going to be directing a show soon, so you're going to have to get into your director mode. Show the actors what you want to do.
Okay, no. Just stop. What do you expect to do? Oh, no, I'm lost. What do you expect us to do about it? Buy food out here in the desert? He asked. "How much bread do you have?" 7 loaves, they said. So Jesus told the crowd to sit down on the ground, and after he gave thanks, he took the 7 loaves, broke them into pieces, and gave them to disciples so they could hand them out. They also had some fish, and he pronounces a blessing over the fish and tells them the disciples hand it out. The crowd eats its fill, this time 7 sacks of leftovers. There were well over 4,000 of them at the meal. And he sent them home, and he himself went back to the boat and set out somewhere else. So why are we hearing this story again?
Yes, because is this the only gospel that has it, the feeding of the 4,000, or is it somewhere else? Do you have a cross?
I'm not sure.
So this story has symbolic similarities to the story in the last chapter about feeding the 5,000, or 2 chapters ago, and some significant differences. In the story of the 5,000, Jesus is feeding Gentiles on the west side of the lake.
Okay, wait. Can we just play a game here?
Sorry, Jews on the west side of the lake.
Spot the difference.
Spot the difference. Okay, let's go for it. Let's do it that way.
Okay, you just said one. First of all...
Opposite sides of the lake.
Opposite sides of the lake.
Feeding Jews or and this one is Gentiles.
Gentiles.
Yep. 5,000. This time it's 4,000.
4,000.
Last time it was 12 baskets of food.
Yep.
And this time it's, and how many fish?
7 loaves of bread.
7 loaves of bread this time. Whereas what did they have last time? They had...
I can't remember. 12.
5 loaves and 2 fish, I think they had in the last story.
Yes, they did.
And this time they got 7 loaves and a few fish, is it so?
A few fish.
Right.
Yep.
So we've got to go, okay, is there any difference?
Is there a difference between the disciples' reactions?
Well, not at the start. They're still going, how do we feed this crowd?
You feed this crowd. How could we do it? How could you expect us to do this?
Yeah, how could you expect us to do this?
So the disciples haven't, even though they've seen this miracle, they haven't learned. They haven't trusted.
It's different because it's Gentiles.
It's Gentiles. Maybe they don't care. And is this in the same location as the Madmen in the area, the
General
10
facility, because we're in the
10
towns is a large area. It's 10 towns, but if it's near the lake, then yes, it's very likely within a vicinity of half an hour walk from each other. Yeah.
Okay, so there's all these similarities, but there's big differences here. The major difference being these are outsiders. These are Gentiles. So the Jews had seen this before, but the Gentiles have not witnessed such a miracle.
Yep, that's right.
So it's not like he's doing the same thing twice.
No, it's with a totally different group of people.
Totally different people. It's like Taylor Swift performing at one place, now performing at the next place.
Just to be culturally relevant right now? Yes.
With a little bit of added difference in.
Yeah, sure. A bit of flair of difference.
For purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you hear her songs, but there's a teaching purpose in this.
Yep.
So Jesus, the bread before, the bread now.
Yep.
This is why am I saying this makes for 3 miracles in a row? I have that written down.
He's just done the blind man, hasn't he?
The blind man, the woman, and now so he does 3 miracles in the Gentile area.
Yes, this is the
that
third.
we have
yes, this is the 3rd miracle in the Gentile area. Yes.
Okay, and the second
time.
Sorry,
so demoniac, and then the man that was blind and dumb, and now this. Yeah.
And this is the second mention of bread.
Yep.
Now, bread comes up a lot in Mark.
Right,
And
yes, it does.
later on, Jesus is going to use it as a teaching example.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus is actually...
He's plot pointing.
Yes, he is. He's
learning.
plotting his way through this to indicate to them, hey, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about this bread. Bread is going to be significant because I am the bread of life.
Yes, that's right.
Anyway. Oh, that sounds so good.
Yeah. Does he say bread of life, or is that in John's gospel? I think that's in John's gospel.
No, does he even say that?
He does in
He
John's
does.
gospel,
Okay,
definitely.
good.
He may say it in Mark's, but he definitely says it in John's.
All right. Okay. So this isn't, but it's also showing you how the disciples still don't get it. They don't understand who this man is. It's going to take some time for them to get it. So, because I've just read it, I've glossed over it like, oh, here we go, reading the same thing again.
But it's deliberately written. It's deliberately different. Either it was different, or I mean, we don't know if it was exactly 5,000 and exactly 4,000 people. I mean, Jesus tells us there were 5,000 men beside women and children, etc. But those numbers are chosen intentionally for a purpose.
And spot the difference is a very important thing to do when similar stories are told.
Yes.
Like when, for example, 2 blind men are healed.
Yep.
Then notice the difference in the story because that's the teaching point around it.
That's right. There's room in ancient cultures to not worry so much about accuracy on numbers of people, locations, order of events, all that kind of stuff doesn't matter to them as much as putting the story together in a way that is enticing and engaging and has these underlying hidden gems of meaning that you have to dig below the surface to get.
Because if you think that Jesus was serious about not feeding, or he was serious about the Gentiles taking the breadcrumbs.
Yes.
Here he is actually going
giving them
and
lots
feeding
of breadcrumbs.
them.
Exactly.
Yes.
He's giving them entire loaves of bread.
So the story is flipping. So that's what makes me think there was a humorous reaction.
Okay.
In
it's like, here's a few
previous
breadcrumbs.
chapter.
Now I'm going to give you everything.
He's breadcrumbing her.
Yes. Yeah, he's breadcrumbing her. That's right.
Breadcrumbing. And look what's going to happen. Now you're going to see, I'm going to heal this person, but now you're actually going to see me feeding your people.
I like that.
In a big way.
I don't doubt that's where Mark's
chastising my prejudiced disciples
who thought the Gentiles don't deserve any of this.
Because I have compassion. I've spent 3 days with you.
Yep, exactly. Here's what ChatGPT says. I just asked that about the feeding of the 4,000 in the region of Decapolis symbolizes Jesus' ministry extension beyond the Jewish community to the Gentiles. The act signifies the blessings of salvation of the kingdom are available to all. The symbolism of the number 7 is, of course, the number of perfection or completion. So in the context of this miracle, the use of 7 loaves could symbolize the completeness of God's provision and inclusion of the Gentiles into the complete, perfected plan of salvation for all peoples. It suggests that God's blessings are not partial, but are intended to fully and just satisfy humanity wholly. So he's kind of going on this underwritten meaning here. There's intention to bring written into the text about how to bring in the Gentiles. That's the message all the way through these few chapters. Is the message of God is not just for the Jews.
Mark is spending a lot of time telling you about how he went to the Gentiles.
Gentiles, yes, he is.
Isn't he? And he's spending a lot of time painting the disciples as, idiots.
As ethnic idiots who can't possibly think that the Jews that the salvation is not just for the Jews.
Because
which could be part of why he's doing the tongue-in-cheek thing with like you're talking about in Tyre, is because that's what his disciples are saying all the time, and he's going, "No, let me show you something here. It's more than just the Jews."
Yeah, pay attention, listen. There's more to learn here. Yep. But when you read this first feeding of the 4,000, you usually notice the disciples' reaction. First.
Yep.
And it's a block.
Yes.
That's all you read. And
that's all you read.
I can't believe they get it. But you have to ask the question, if I've just read, this is the first time I've ever read this about Jesus, do I understand him? Do I get the point? I actually need to know more.
We need to have a bit more digging ourselves, don't we, to get it?
Yeah. The story isn't over, and thank goodness, because I need to hear more.
Yep.
I'm not convinced yet.
Yep, okay.
On
you
this
need
man.
more convincing on Jesus.
I need more convincing.
And Mark's going to give us a few more convincings, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. So when they get back on the boat and they go out for this other place, and when they arrive, Pharisees come out and they started in on him, badgering him to prove himself. Because you know what? At this point in the story, I'm going, I need Jesus to prove himself.
Okay.
I feel like I do.
Yep.
Don't you?
Well, that's what they're thinking.
Right.
Yeah. I personally, I think he's done a pretty good job of proving himself so far. But
Well, you're easy to convince.
I'm easy to convince. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I'm already
Did
convinced.
he have you at hello?
He had me at hello. Yeah, that's right. You had me at hello. That's right.
Okay.
No, well, actually, no. I spent a lot of time making sure, but I'm much more comfortable with it now than I once was.
Right, okay.
I'm quite comfortable with people taking their time and researching it and not just jumping in blindly. I'd rather you do the research yourself first.
Okay, so hello and how are you?
You can go a bit further
Further
than
than
that.
that,
You can
okay.
dig. You can go digging. If you're not sure, dig. Don't just accept it just because Pastor Rowan says it or someone else tells you.
Did you hear that? Don't accept it if Pastor Rowan says it.
I said don't accept it just because Pastor Rowan says it.
Okay. When they arrived, the Pharisees come out and they started on him, as I read, badgering him to prove himself, pushing him up against the wall. Provoked. Jesus is provoked. It's interesting. Provoked, he said, "Why does this generation clamor for miraculous guarantees? If I have anything to say about it, you'll not get so much as a hint of a guarantee." Do you understand that Jesus just spoke literally to me?
So you've been
Why-
asking for a guarantee, a
Yes.
miracle, and Jesus is going, you're not going to get one, Jeanie.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm like,
How does that
can
make
you
you feel?
just do another
Can we just turn this
sign?
into a counselling session?
Just do one more thing and I'm there.
Yeah.
One more thing.
Right. Why one more thing? Because Jesus would say, hey, I've already fed the 5,000 and the 4,000. You didn't believe then.
Well, I wasn't in that crowd.
Ah,
I'm turning up.
okay.
I'm hearing these things.
Okay. Well, you're going to see that later on, maybe it's not in this version, but later on they do show up wanting more feed. And
What?
he says, guys, you're not here because you're not here because you want to see a miracle. You're here because you got fed yesterday.
Well, I'm making a point because I don't think we're in a different generation. We still want Jesus to provide
Still
signs
want
for us.
signs. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that's one of the potential downsides of charismatic Pentecostal theology. I think we have, in the effort to try to, and rightfully so, try to teach and believe and practice the fact that Jesus does intervene in our world and he does heal and he does miracles and he does bring the kingdom into our world. We have potentially run the risk of making the intervention the goal rather than recognizing that sometimes we wait for the sign at the end. We've got to focus on the end. We can't just be thinking about the here and now. Jesus' faithfulness is not determined on whether or not I see a breakthrough in this area of my life, whether I see a sign here. Whether I do or not is not going to be the end, because one day he will wipe away the tears. One day he will put the wrongs right. And so I think we need to try to keep that long game in mind. I'd say that to all of us. If we don't see, if we think we're only going to have a miracle, if we're going to need a miracle to believe in Jesus, Jesus says right here, you missed the point. Miracles are secondary here. Miracles aren't primary.
That's a shame.
It's a shame. It's the way it is. They're not bad. They're just not the primary goal of the Christian life, to see God do miracles.
No, maybe we don't need to see miracles, but there are times when we need to feel his presence in our life. We need to feel assured. And even though, as I read this, I need to seek a sign. I need a sign. I was comforted in my own humanity when I was listening to a sermon of somebody very well known. I'm not going to mention who it is. And he was disclosing how he was in a very sad, or he felt like giving up or something like that. He was worrying about something, and he said, God, give me a sign. I just need to know you're here. And he said, there was a rainbow in the sky. And he was like, I need to see that rainbow. If it gets any bigger, then I'll know that you're with me. And the rainbow got bigger.
Really?
Yeah. And he felt, and I don't mean to make fun. I'm not making fun of him, because he said this sincerely. And he found that to be a very encouraging thing. And it is an encouraging thing. And I would like more of those rainbows in my life.
Yeah, but what do you do when you don't see the rainbow?
Oh, well, everybody's different.
Well, what I mean here, this is worth hanging on for a second. I know your husband's at home with 4 kids. What do you do? I'm all for that, because sometimes you do see the rainbow. Sometimes you do see the wool, the fleece, like to use Gideon's analogy, the water on the fleece or the ground dry or whatever. Sometimes we see that. But Hebrews 11 records people who didn't see the rainbow, who went all the way to martyrdom without seeing the rainbow get bigger. The question is our faith is our faith determined by whether or not we see the rainbow get bigger, whether or not we see the miracle? I would argue that if we do, as beautiful as those things are, if our faith is going to be shattered by that, then the times we don't see that, we're not putting our faith in the right thing. This is what I'm going to talk about repeatedly on our Revelation series again. We need an apocalypse of the eschaton. We need an unveiling, a revelation, a revealing of the final end that is the other side of the grave. And if we can have that, we can endure the times when the rainbow gets bigger and the times when we don't see the rainbow get bigger, because our faith is not determined on the miracle.
I look forward to that message.
Okay. Hold that thought.
With all sincerity.
Yep.
And
the apocalypse of the eschaton.
Eschaton.
We all need an apocalypse of the eschaton.
In this chapter here, Jesus asks a question. Is this the first time he's asked a question? I should have marked that, but I'm not sure. But why does this generation clamour? In the reading of this, because I've just confessed to you that I want a sign, it's almost like Jesus is like at this point going to me, hey, what do you think right now? Do you need a sign? All these things we've just been saying. Yeah. At this point, Mark is engaging. It's a question asking us,
isn't it?
Yeah. Mark is engaging us within the text.
I should have just read it because he says it better than I just said it.
No, you said it really well.
Oh, thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Yeah, but you're right. It's a question back to us now.
Yes.
It's like Jesus is asking us, what are you going to believe? Do you need the miracle?
Yeah.
Yep.
Because the point isn't so much about the Pharisees. It's meant to be for us, the reader.
Yep.
Because he is writing to a reader.
To a reader, that's right.
Okay. So there's a question for us to answer.
Yeah.
And then after that, this next section is called Contaminating Yeast.
Ooh, the yeast of the Pharisees and Herod.
Yes. He left them, got back in the boat again. So much boating.
There's a lot of boating on the Sea of Galilee. It's quicker to get around the Sea of Galilee by boat than to walk. Much quicker.
I wonder if did he own the boat? Did he rent the boat? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
It's full of fishermen, so someone got a boat.
But the disciples forgot to pack a lunch. Remember, they just
got fed 4,000 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
They forgot to pack a lunch, and except for a single loaf of bread. This is the third time bread has come up, as far as I know, I think. There wasn't a crumb in the boat because the Gentiles had eaten the crumbs.
Yeah, that's right. They'd eaten everything.
Jesus warned, be very careful. Keep a sharp eye out for the contaminating yeast of Pharisees and the followers of Herod. Meanwhile, the disciples don't seem to listen to this. The disciples were finding fault with each other because they had forgotten to bring bread. So Jesus says this thing about yeast, right?
Yep.
And he says this thing about the spiritual, I suppose, but they turn it into the physical.
To the natural.
To the natural. Oh, thinking, Jesus is talking about us not bringing bread.
Watch out. Whatever you do, don't use the yeast of the Pharisees to cook your own bread.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, did we? Did we
use that somewhere? No. Yeah, where'd this come from?
Okay. So they're getting upset with each other because they've forgotten to bring bread. They're arguing. This paints a great picture about their relationship.
Oh, totally. I thought you were bringing lunch.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were.
Well, the funny thing is, they're fishermen, but here they are looking after bread.
Yep.
So, not all of them are fishermen.
They would all use bread and fish. Bread and fish was a normal Mediterranean diet. Yep.
All right. Jesus overheard and said, why are you fussing? Because you forgot bread? Don't you see the point of all this? Don't you get it at all? Remember the 5 loaves I broke for the 5,000? How many baskets of leftovers did you pick up?
12.
And the 7 loaves for the 4,000? How many bags full of leftovers did you get?
7.
Do you still not get it?
And it's interesting, it stops. He doesn't answer it. Mark doesn't answer it, does he?
No, he doesn't.
He still asks us to answer it.
And yeah, it's a question to us.
It's a question to ask. To us, yeah.
Because it's obvious they don't get it.
No. And his question is, well, what about you digging below the surface? What am I trying to say here?
So what they haven't got is Jesus takes care of them at all points. He blesses, he multiplies the small thing, that he is to be trusted.
Yep.
And Jesus is using bread to explain all of these things.
Yes.
The bread of life.
The word being bread.
Yeah.
The bread of life.
So Mark is humanizing us again, or the whole thing, using examples that we know. Bread.
Yep.
Continued, appealing to our stomachs.
Yep. To illustrate a deeper need, need for sustenance than that.
And mentioning everybody was always hungry.
Yep.
As well.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to show there's more to life than just the natural feed. And he's using the word yeast as well, which is a different issue again.
Oh, yeah. Can you explain what that means?
Well, yeast in the Bible is never seen as a good thing. Actually, that's not true. I think there's one time when yeast is used as a positive metaphor. But generally, almost exclusively, yeast is used as a negative metaphor. So in the Old Testament, they would have to take all the yeast out of their house. Because the reason is a little bit of yeast, Jesus will say, get into the whole dough. As we know, if you ever made bread with yeast, you don't need very much, and then blend it. You have to spend a lot of time blending it through. And so it's used in this context as a negative connotation of their teaching, of their worldview. And he's saying, look, if you got to be careful, because you only need a little bit of the Pharisees' worldview to get in, or the Herodians' worldview to get in, and it's going to corrupt the whole batch of dough. Paul will talk about yeast in this way too in his writings. So he's saying, beware of letting the subtleties of that teaching corrupt the loaf of bread that I'm giving you, the good bread that I'm giving you.
And he's shown us what that teaching is by the hand washing.
All the things he's shown in Mark's.
Yep. Honour your father and mother.
Yep, that's right.
So we've got a good sense of the character of the Pharisees.
Yeah.
The heart of the Pharisees.
Certainly as far as Mark is concerned.
Yeast.
Yep.
All right. So Mark continues on.
Okay.
Feeding us things, giving us ideas. He's teaching us.
He's teaching us through what Jesus did as much as what Jesus says.
Maybe I'm starting to like him.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know.
Come on.
Like him, I don't know. But
You're halfway there. We're halfway through the book. So
by this question here, do you still not get it? Mark doesn't let us off the hook.
Mm-hmm.
He continues on. They arrived at Bethsaida. Bethsaida again.
Mm-hmm. Back to Bethsaida.
Some people brought a
Philip and Nathaniel's hometown.
This is relevant, Bethsaida. We'll get to that, which you probably know. I'm sure you do. You know everything.
I
Some
don't.
people brought him a sightless man and begged Jesus to give him a healing touch, taking him by the hand.
Except that it means house of bread. Is that what you were going to say?
Does it?
Oh, I don't know. I thought that was what you were going to say.
No, I wish it did. That'd be funny. Taking him by the hand, he led him out of the village. So this is a sightless man. He does what he
did with the other guy. But this is a Jewish version.
He takes him by the hand and he pulls him out of the village. And here he spits in the man's eyes again.
Yep.
He can't see this though. So the
No,
spitting is for who?
For the others.
For the others.
Right.
Yeah. And he lays hands on him, which he can feel.
Yep.
And he asks him, do you see anything? And he looked up. And he says, I see men. They look like walking trees. So Jesus laid hands on his eyes again. The man looked hard and realized that he had recovered perfect sight, saw everything in bright 20/20 focus. Jesus sent him straight home, telling him, don't enter the village. So is Jesus losing his power here?
No. There's got to be more significance to this gradual progressive healing. I have heard it taught that, look, it's just to show that sometimes healing is a progressive thing. You don't always get immediate healing. It takes time. So there's part of that. But I suspect, don't think I recall studying it. Not that it's stuck in my mind. I suspect that you're about to tell me that there's more meaning to it. I'm going to let you do it.
Oh, come on.
Because I haven't looked at it recently.
Okay.
But there'll be more to it than that, this progressive thing.
Right. Well, let's start with Bethsaida.
Sure, good. Tell me what I mean.
He takes him out of the village.
Yep.
I read that. That's like, and he says to him, don't go back. Don't go back to the village.
Right.
So there's a threat. Don't you think? I read it, there's a threat in Bethsaida.
Don't go back because there's a threat.
That's what I read.
Okay. Yeah, that could be. I haven't thought about that, but it could be.
Because I'm going to cross books here, which I'm trying not to do in this, but it's relevant to this point.
I've been crossing books all day, so go ahead. Why don't you?
You have. I haven't.
Yeah.
And later on it says, do you remember when he says, don't be the towns of Bethsaida, how cursed you are.
Chorazin and Bethsaida, yep.
Yeah. So basically later on in a different book, we learn that Bethsaida is a really bad town. That there are terrible things going in that town. And what does he say he wants to?
Well, he actually refers to 3 towns, all very close to each other, on the north shore of Galilee: Capernaum, Bethsaida, and Chorazin.
I knew you'd know this part. Yeah,
right. I know because I've been there. Bethsaida is awesome. It's actually a big city. It was a very big town in its day. And these are 3 of the heartland of Judaism in Galilee. These 3 towns are like as Jewish as you can get. And Jesus is saying, you guys failed to recognize. I did miracles with you and you failed to recognize me. That's what his rebuke is.
Right.
I don't know if you maybe tell me more. Is there some reference to some great evil that was going on in those towns? I've not ever thought about that. I've just thought about the fact that it was like they were the heart of Judaism and they still missed their Messiah. But it could be more than that. So tell me what you've got.
Well, we could just take it from the yeast of the Pharisees.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go back into that village because it's full of yeast.
Full of yeast, yep.
Could be that.
Yep, could be that.
And it's actually here in Matthew 11:20 to 21.
Mm-hmm.
Woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida! For if the miracles that were performed in you had been performed in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. But this town, Jesus knows that the heart is, they're not going to change. It's not going to be a positive place for this man. This man is a blind man. He takes him out of the village. Perhaps the blind man couldn't see what was going on around him.
Yeah, maybe so, yeah.
It's just, it really, I'm confused by it because why did Jesus say that? So I'm looking for reasons. Why does he say, don't go back into the village?
Yeah,
perhaps the guy wasn't from there.
Maybe he wasn't going to be accepted when he went back in there. Yeah.
Because Jesus doesn't really tell. He sometimes tells people things, commands.
Yeah.
Here's a command, like he said to the girl, get up and eat in previous chapters. And this one, he's like, don't enter the village.
Don't go in the village on your way home. So he's not from this village. There has to be a reason why he wasn't to go back in the village. I've got no idea. Can you help me?
No, well, I've hopefully tried to help you there.
Yeah,
because we only know from
that's
Matthew
only from the text
that town wasn't.
Yeah, but
there was something going on in that town.
But
they weren't
Jesus spent a lot of time in Chorazin and Bethsaida and Capernaum, even though and he did miracles there. Just because he says, if the miracles that had been done in you had been done in, Chorazin, had been done in Sodom and Gomorrah, they would have repented, or Tyre and Sidon. He says, I mean, you touched on this last year, that part of it is the hospitality thing. That's, when it references Sodom and Gomorrah, maybe they weren't hospitable towards him. Maybe, yeah.
It's a really strange thing. Jesus pulls him out.
Jesus tell the
While you look up ChatGPT,
you keep going.
I'll keep going on.
I'm intrigued.
The most interesting thing and the most relevant thing about this, I think, is the fact that the man isn't able to fully see from the first
Yes,
touch.
that's right. That's the bit that always gets me. It's a process.
What have we just learned about the disciples?
They're still on a process of seeing.
Yes.
Ah, okay. So this is like a gradual seeing of the natural of what they're experiencing in the spiritual, which is their eyes are being opened slowly.
Yes, Jesus has just had this conversation with these guys.
That's
Don't
true.
you get it yet? And here we have a representation of the disciples seeing with their own eyes the very thing that Jesus is talking about.
Which is gradual.
The guy can't see the first time because it's an example of what the disciples are going through.
All they see is partial. They see trees walking around. They haven't got the full picture.
Yes. Yes.
This
why
is a
Mark
good example
has put
why
this in here.
he's put that story there. This is why you have to read it in its context. Oh, that's brilliant, Jeanie. I've learned a lot of things today thanks to your research. That's really good.
I told you I don't like Mark, so I had to research
you've
this whole
researched
book.
it. Well, GPT says it could be affording messianic misunderstanding. It could be a call for reflection by telling the man not to return to the village. Jesus might have been encouraging him and directly the readers to reflect on the miracle and its significance away from the distractions or skeptical, superficial reactions of the crowd. It could be for judgment or unbelief, as you've already said. It's mentioned elsewhere in the Gospels. So by instructing the healed man not to return to Bethsaida, here we go. It could have been a symbolic statement about the judgment of the place. So he could have been saying, they've had enough chances. I'm going to, it's a symbolic dust off your feet kind of thing. And it could have been protection for the healed man. So you've touched on all of those.
Yeah.
You sure you didn't use ChatGPT?
I don't use that thing. I
That's
use my brain.
Use your brain and the scholars. And
But this is a really good example of faith. This story that we see partially because of our unbelief, and we talked about unbelief.
That process
before, stopping
of becoming more like Christ means it's a process.
Yes, it's a process of revelation of Him and revelation of ourselves in our faith walk.
Yep. So gradually we see more.
Yes.
I like it.
And then he goes on here. So
there's more in Mark 8. We haven't even finished yet.
We're almost there. So you've got this example of this guy partially seeing and then seeing.
Yep.
And then Jesus asks to his disciples, who do the people say I am?
Yep.
So partial sight, full sight. Now, not that the disciples have full sight, but Jesus is showing them the journey they're going to go on, and he asks them, who do you say I am?
Mm-hmm.
Jesus,
Which is the same question we've been asking. Who is this man?
Who is this man? Yeah. Some say John the Baptist, the ghost again. Others say Elijah.
Oh, there we go.
Elijah again.
Reference to Elijah.
Yeah, still some say the prophets, one of the prophets. this has already been stated
Yep,
as well.
previously.
So this is the second time.
Yep.
First time we hear this is what people said. Now
the disciples are saying this.
Yes. So then he asks, and you?
What about you guys?
Yeah, what do you say? What are you saying about me? Who am I? And Peter gives the answer, you are the Christ, the Messiah. This is the first time we have heard any reference to him being the Messiah.
Yep.
So
halfway through the book, we're getting this little drip feed from Peter.
Yes.
And just when you think Peter's got it, he's about to go downhill and again in a hurry. But yes, this is like halfway through its drip feed to say this is who he is, but then you're still going to have to figure out that what the Messiah looks like is different to what you think the Messiah is going to be.
The Messiah they are thinking of is a military leader, a revolutionary, right?
Yep, exactly.
That he's going to come in and he's going to take over the town. He's going to kick out the Romans and he's going to basically live on the crown, live on the throne forever.
Yep, that's right. That's what they're looking for.
And they are thinking of themselves like, who am I going to be in
who
this
will I
kingdom?
be against this?
This is all going on underneath this. So maybe they can't see properly because they're so busy wondering who they are in this.
Mm-hmm.
Wondering about how
they're blinded by their own desire for notoriety.
Yeah, and self-worth. They've already been off performing the miracles like he can set people free from demons like they did before. So they're growing in pride as well as growing in understanding.
Yep, sure. I'm with you on that.
Right. Okay, we'll keep going. Push on. And he says, yes, I'm the Messiah. You are the Messiah, Peter said. And Jesus warns them to keep it quiet, not to breathe a word of it to anyone. He then began explaining things to them. And here Jesus says something really shocking.
To Peter.
Yep. Which is nothing like what the Messiah is meant to be like. So Peter's thinking, I'm amazing, I got it. He's the Messiah, but here, hang on. It's necessary that the Son of Man proceed to an ordeal of suffering, be tried and found guilty by the elders, high priests, and religion scholars, be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said this simply and clearly so they couldn't miss it. But I bet you they went, wait, what?
You're getting it, Jeanie.
Yeah. And Peter grabs him in protest and turning and seeing his disciples wavering, wondering what to believe, Jesus confronted Peter. Peter, get out of my way. Satan, get lost. You have no idea how God works. Why did he say Satan get lost?
Yeah, it's a bold statement, isn't it? It's basically to call Peter Satan after he's just well, actually, this is where he has his name changed. In the other Gospels, this is the very thing. He says, "You no longer." I call you. Well, John's Gospel calls him that Peter earlier, but other Gospels say it's this very moment that he says, "You are no longer Cephas, you are now Peter," and then he calls him Satan. So he is showing. I think he's using very strong language. It could be that Satan. The scholars are divided about this, so I don't think there's going to be any one size fits answer. Some people think that somehow Satan had invaded Peter to the point where he was using him to try to dissuade Jesus from going to the cross, saying, look, there's a better way. You don't have to die. So that's one school of thought. Other people think he's just talking metaphorically about the ways of the world and the false belief about the Messiah. I don't know where I sit on that. I think if scholars can't figure that out, there's not enough indication that I can see in the text to tell me exactly what Jesus meant by saying, get behind me, Satan.
What if, and there's no writing on this at all, I'm just making this up as I go, what if he's actually saying, Peter, hang on, what does he say to Peter? Peter, get out of my way.
Yeah, get behind me, yep.
Peter, get behind me. And then in his spiritual mind, Holy Spirit sense, he can sense Satan in the area. Yeah. And that statement, Satan, get lost, is actually directed at the evil beings.
At the spiritual being.
Around him.
Yep, that's as good an answer as any. Yeah, it just says, except it says he reprimanded Peter. He says, you're not, but he reprimanded Peter, get behind me, Satan. So it seems like he's equating Satan with Peter, the accuser with Peter. But I think it could be in the language.
Just
I think this is why
it's
in the translation. I think this is why the scholars probably aren't quite sure.
Because what if this is an actual temptation point?
It is definitely a temptation
for Jesus,
point. Oh, no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it because he's just declared himself as the Messiah. We just had them declare him as the Messiah. So this is going to be as good an opportunity as ever to shortcut the whole process and do the military thing. rather than the way of death, the way of the cross.
Yeah, because Jesus could doubt and go, oh, look at the things that's going to happen to me, an ordeal of suffering. I'm going to be found guilty.
Yeah.
But then the temptation is like, hang on a minute. We
Maybe
can
there's
do
an
it a
easier
different way.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that is a satanic temptation that's coming. So your idea is as good as any.
Peter, get out of my way, move out of the way while I reprimand Satan.
It could be that.
I don't know.
Could be that. Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard that version, but I as I say, I know scholars, some will have an emphatic answer as to what they think it's saying, but I don't think it's quite that emphatic. The principle is that definitely that we know that the enemy wants to avoid him going to the cross at this point. It wants to avoid the Messiah finding his way.
There's this note written to myself here. It says, unbelief is the mother of many evils and it has a mysterious power.
Okay.
About that line. And then I reference here, he led the blind man away from unbelieving Bethsaida.
Yep.
Because there's a mysterious power of Bethsaida. Anyway, it all connects somehow.
Well, we haven't got anywhere near enough time to go into it, but Jesus has taken them a long walk to tell them this story. He's taken them up the hill to the foothills of the sea of Mount Hermon in the far north of the country, a long way from anywhere. Jews don't go up this place. He took them, and you see this in The Chosen too. They go up there in the first couple episodes to Caesarea Philippi, and they actually do a really good job of showing what the temple looks like, the temple of the goats and the temple of Apollo up there. It was pagan worship central, and there was a place called the Gates of Hell up there, and he takes them there, and it's like he actually takes them deliberately to the very place that is Hell's Gate to show them that the Messiah, the gates of hell will not prevail, as Matthew's version says, against this place, against the kingdom of God. So he's been intentional. He's actually gone to Satan's throne, if you like, the heart of satanic territory, to declare who he is. So there is definitely a spiritual, not only is it practical for the disciples to see them go into this place, but also too, he's proclaiming it into the spirit realm. He's coming to the very place where the demonic forces, the forces of evil, do their worst and devalue humanity to the nth degree. I mean, I'm not going to talk about some of the shameful stuff that took place on this podcast, but it's like the worst of deprivation that humans could be in, and it was worship. And he goes right there to declare and have him declared as the Messiah. He's pronouncing to the spirit realm, definitely. So when he says, go behind me, Satan, Satan's listening. No doubt about it. The evil forces are at work in this place.
And the line, you have no idea how God works. What do you think of that?
Well, I think that if he's talking to Satan there or whether he's talking to Peter, I suppose it's the same. It's that God's ways are above our ways. I don't think anyone anticipated that the Messiah would die, but the way up was the way down. And that's how God works. That's the heart of God. He's always been that way. He always comes down to earth. He always engages. He teaches us that the way to greatness is giving up. So I don't think humans get that.
That's what he teaches in the next part. Self-sacrifice is the way.
It's the way,
My way to saving yourself.
To pick up your cross and follow me. That's right. So he's teaching them the way of the cross here.
Yeah, and then which is so different to the Messiah way that they're thinking.
Yes, and they're arguing about which is the greatest, all that kind of stuff.
Yes. Yeah. So he tells them, as what we're just talking about, like, you're not in the driver's seat. I am. Anyone who intends to come with me has to let me lead. And don't run from suffering. Embrace it. Follow me and I'll show you how. Self-help is no help at all. It would have been really shocking to hear this and so counter to everything they've thought
opposite
about.
of what they thought.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and they would have been expecting him to do great things, but then they're hearing this very different thing. And what good would it be, Jesus says in verse 37, to get everything you want and lose the real you? What could you ever trade your soul for? This is Mark asking us.
Yeah, he's asking us now. He's writing the question
and
for us.
And he's showing you how valuable Jesus is. If you don't get it yet, I'm now painting a picture that this guy, Jesus, who's done all these miracles, is valued.
Yes.
He's worth
worth
trading your soul for.
Yeah, giving your soul over. Yeah, giving up your life for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if any of you are embarrassed over me and the way I'm leading you when you get around your fickle and unfocused friends, know that you'll be an even greater embarrassment to the Son of Man when he arrives in the splendor of God, his Father, with an army of the holy angels. What a thing to hear.
That's big, isn't it?
Yeah. And this is the first mentions of Son of Man.
Yep.
Would they have known what that was?
Yes, definitely.
which is a reference to Daniel.
Daniel chapter 7.
And the Son of Man is who? Or what did they think he was?
They thought he was a human figure that would ascend into heaven and reign beside God.
Wow. So Jesus is saying that about himself.
About himself, yeah. It was his favourite term for himself. Is this the first time he uses it in this gospel, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
There you
so.
go. Yeah, I'll take your word for it. I mean, that's a good example of how you've got to read the gospel standalone because other versions have things out of order and Jesus
could
often
be
refers
wrong,
to himself
'cause
as Son of Man. But
Could be wrong, but I'm
Yep.
pretty sure.
no, it could be. It could be. So he's using it. Well, it would make sense that because it's a messianic term. So it would make sense that he's just been referred to as the Messiah. They would know, oh, the Messiah, that's the Son of Man. They would know that. So it makes sense that he would now refer to himself in that context after he has just had them reference him as the Messiah.
And he's telling them here, your conditions of a disciple are self-denial, take up the cross, follow me.
Yep, that's right. That's the key. The way up is the way down.
It's like, who is this man? But what journey? What have I signed up to?
What am I going to have to do?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's in one of the other versions when they leave this story is where they start to argue about who's the greatest.
Yes, they don't know. It comes up.
It comes up, does it?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Oh, yeah, next chapter.
Next chapter.
Let's
okay.
go there.
Let's go there then. All right.
This is another long chapter.
Another one.
50 verses.
Sorry,
so
folks.
I'll try to be quicker.
All right. Let's just see if we can go
I'll
through
sum it up. I won't read as much.
All
I'm
right.
reading because I assume people aren't reading.
No. Well, let's assume
anyway.
they are. If you haven't,
Okay, let's
you might have
assume
to
you are.
pause this, listen to it, and then come back to the conversation because we
Okay.
won't read it all. Okay.
So chapter
our commitment.
9, chapter 9 actually continues on chapter
Yeah.
8. And when Jesus says, this isn't pie in the sky by and by. This isn't pie in the sky by and by. Some of you are standing here and are going to see it happen, talking about what the Messiah arriving, the kingdom coming.
Yes, that's what it seems
actually
to be.
says going to see it happen,
Yep.
seeing the kingdom
Kingdom
of God
come.
arrive in full force.
Power. Yep, that's right.
Does that mean some of them are going to live forever?
Well, that's what some scholars have thought it was saying, or the implication is that, some of you who are still alive will see me come back again. However, I think the hint is in the text.
Because 6 days
6 days
later,
later.
they do see it.
Peter, James, and John.
This
do
is the
see it.
kingdom arriving in full force, the three, because
Yep.
Jesus takes three
Pete, Jim, and John.
up a high mountain
Yep.
again. Because he's got the 12 disciples, then he's got the smaller group within the group.
Yep.
Okay, and here Jesus starts to look really strange. His appearance changes from inside out, right before their eyes. His clothes start to shimmer. They glisten whiter than any bleach could make them. And Elijah, again.
There's Elijah.
Third mention of Elijah.
Yep.
Along with Moses, came into view in a deep conversation with Jesus. And Peter interrupts like, Rabbi, this is a great moment. Let's build memorials. It's a funny thing to say. One for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. He blurted this out without thinking, stunned as they all were by what they were seeing. That tells me there that we know that John Mark, who's friends with Peter, that later on, Peter's like, I was really embarrassed about that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was an embarrassing moment, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He tells him that. Yep.
But to understand this part, we need prior knowledge. So who is Elijah and why do they keep thinking
Okay.
Elijah?
Okay, so that part of that was what I said where it says, I will send the promised Elijah before the coming of the king. They thought that was, and John the Baptist actually claimed that title for himself, metaphorically.
Yes, and we'll just skip ahead here and say that Jesus actually does say later on in verses 12 to 13
That
Elijah did come first, that John
They
the
didn't recognise
Baptist
him.
was John.
That's correct, yes. So there was always this belief in ancient Jewish thought that before Messiah would come, Elijah would come and return. Because remember, what happened to Elijah?
He just vanished.
He went up in a fiery chariot, never died. So there was
Yeah.
that led to this thing of Elijah will come back again.
And Moses, did he die?
Moses did die.
Did we have a record of that?
Yes.
We do. But he didn't die. Everyone had crossed into the promised land and he stayed behind.
He was dead before they crossed.
Was he?
Mm-hmm. He went up on the hill and died. But to this day, no one knows where his body is.
But that's it because they never saw it.
No, but there's no doubt that the Jews of the first century would have believed that he died.
All right.
But yes, God buried him is what the belief was. Because Peter himself, who we're talking about in this story, he writes in his own writings, he quotes from the book of Enoch, which I talked about a lot last year, the book of Enoch, that actually quotes about Moses, the devil and Michael fighting, arguing over whether or not who gets to the rights to the body of Moses. I'm not going to go there, but that's there was this ancient belief at the time that there was this kind of the claim on the body of Moses, and but that's a whole separate story. But yes, the story is Moses went up on the mountain, he died, and then Joshua took over.
All right. Okay.
So yes, he did die, but they didn't have his body, but they did mourn for him for 40 days.
All right. R.I.P. Mo.
Yep. R.I.P. Mo.
So here, but he's back again.
Yeah, he's
here,
back
and
again.
this is called the Transfiguration.
Transfiguration.
Why is this story important?
Because of what we just said. This is Jesus revealing to his disciples the true nature that was hidden. His true
godly.
divinity, his godly nature, his divinity that he had emptied himself of, that he had. And when I say emptied, it's a willing thing. It's not something where it's forced upon him. He has willingly emptied himself or shrouded or hidden his glory.
So they're seeing him.
They're seeing
not as
him,
human.
They're seeing the human. Well, he's still human, but they're seeing the unveiling, the apocalypse. They're seeing what's really they're seeing the divine now, which is kind of shrouded in his humanity.
The possibility.
They're seeing now. This is who's behind the humanity. They're seeing his divine component now.
And he is on, because I'm going to say on equal terms, on equal level, because they would have revered Elijah and Moses.
Oh, yes.
And so Mark is here equating and then positioning above two major players.
Yep.
Do
Do you know what these two major players represent?
What?
Well, what's Moses represent?
I don't know.
What did Moses give them?
The Ten Commandments.
Yeah, and by implication, stretch it out a bit more. What beyond the Ten Commandments?
The law.
The Torah. Moses is the Torah. What is Elijah?
I always wonder about Elijah. I just think of the dry bones.
Elijah's not the dry bones.
He's not?
No.
Who's the dry bones?
The Valley of Dry Bones. Or
Yeah.
Elisha. You're talking about the man who gets thrown into Elisha's tomb, touches his bones and comes back to life?
No.
No. Talking about the vision of the dry bones. That's Ezekiel.
Why am I getting this confused? What did Elijah?
Elijah
was with
is
the
with King Ahab. He was
and the bulls.
yes, the Mount
And
Carmel.
Mount
Yep,
Carmel.
That's right. Yeah, Mount
Okay.
Carmel. Right? Elijah is regarded as probably the most prominent prophet.
But he wanted to run away.
Yeah,
He
wasn't
ran away,
perfect.
and then he was
Yeah.
in the valley, and there were dry bones in the valley.
No, you're conflating
Who's
stories.
that?
That's Ezekiel's vision in Ezekiel 37.
No. And he said, no,
No.
I can't be. Oh, well, whatever.
There's
It's
no
a long day.
there's no dry bones in in Elijah's story that I can think of.
Are you for Rizzle?
Oh, I don't know. I could be wrong, but I'm not thinking of any. But
But he goes into
just
the cave. Okay, we're off.
He goes into the cave. Yes,
and
he does
the
go into
angel
the
comes
cave.
and feeds him.
Yeah. That's after the death. That's after he
Doesn't he say,
defeats
"I
the
wanna
prophets
be
of Baal."
dead?
Yes.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, he
I want
says
to be
that.
dead like dry bone. No.
No, he doesn't say that. He does say, "I'm ready to die," and the Lord says, "No, I'm not finished with you yet. Elijah, go back and
Right,
appoint
okay,
Elisha.
okay.
Go back and appoint Hazael, king of Aram." There's 3 things he has to do before he's finished.
Oh, man. This is
you're
getting late in
confused.
the day.
But Elijah, to the Jews of the time, he represents the prophets. So when Moses and Elijah appear, this is a confirmation that the law and the prophets testify about
yes.
Jesus.
An
That's the key
affirmation
point.
as
It's an
well.
affirmation
Yes.
to the disciples. This is the law and the prophets. They knew that.
It's all linking up.
Yeah. And they would know. When they say Moses and Elijah, they know that actually is representative of the law and the prophets, the whole of their Old Testament scriptures. And the whole of their Old Testament scriptures, this vision is confirming that this is the Messiah. Remember, they've just announced it 6 days
Yes.
before? This is the
This is the
confirmation.
Messiah
The
now.
law and the prophets
Yep.
testify to this.
Now, while Jesus said earlier on, woe to this generation who asks for a sign, here they get a great sign.
Yes, just 3 of them
Just
do.
the 3 of them.
Yep.
And they keep it quiet until
Yeah,
later
he actually
on.
tells them to keep it quiet.
Imagine sitting on that.
I know. Even to the other fellas. Hey, what happened on the hill, guys? I'd love to tell you, but I'd have to kill you if I told you.
Yeah.
It's top secret.
Can't tell you, boys. Yeah.
It's classified.
Yeah, and this is what leads to the conversation.
Who's the greatest? Yeah, exactly. We want to be in the crowd. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I can't imagine if they might have been whispering about it and someone got overheard it and go, "What? Who do they think they are?"
Yeah.
It's always Pete, Jim, and John. It's always Pete, Jim, and John.
There's this big heavenly confirmation.
Yes.
That's what this point is about. They've seen it, and it changes them, doesn't it? It changes those guys, but the other ones are not privy.
No, they're not privy to it.
Oh, but we've got to mention there's a radiant cloud.
Yep. What does that remind you of? On a mountain. Cloud of God's glory.
Yes.
Moses is there.
Yes.
Whoa,
yes.
that sounds
right.
sounds very familiar.
And the cloud that went before them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
See that. Do a study on clouds, people.
Yep. Oh,
it's
yeah,
mentioned
definitely.
Quite a lot. There's
This
something
is
significant.
definitely significant. So this is like another Mount Sinai experience.
Yes. Even somebody the other day said to me, I feel like there's a cloud in front of me. A good cloud. There you go. See?
A good cloud. Yeah, there you go. Yep.
Yeah, we still remember these parts in the story.
Yeah, great.
All right. Where are we going to? Jumping ahead. When they came back down the mountain to the other disciples, there were a huge crowd around them. Just like when Moses came down, there was a huge crowd waiting there. Jesus comes down, there's a big crowd. And the religion scholars were cross-examining them. As soon as the people in the crowd saw Jesus admiring them, they ran and greeted him. And he asked, what's going on and what's all the commotion? And then it turns out that there is a man who's made speechless by a demon, and whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth.
The man whose son.
The man whose son.
Yep.
Yes, yes. And the man said, I told your disciples hoping they could deliver him, but they couldn't. And Jesus said, what a generation, no sense of God. How many times do I have to go over these things? How much longer do I have to put up with this? Bring the boy here. Does he sound frustrated?
He sounds a bit disappointed, doesn't he?
But you know what? Who else came down from a mountain of cloud and then was frustrated with his
that's
people?
Right. He's mimicking Moses here.
Mimicking Moses. Totally.
Their unbelief at the bottom of the mountain.
But who's this for? It's for the three that were with him.
Yeah, that's
they're
right.
Remembering
they're
this story. And then they walk down and they relive the story.
That's right. They're living out this whole story all over again.
And it's the same, almost the same thing. What is this generation? No sense of God.
Yep.
And Jesus asks the man, how long has this been going on? And the man says, ever since he was a little boy. And he says, if you can do anything, do it. Have a heart and help us. And Jesus said, if there are no ifs among believers, anything can happen. No sooner were the words out of his mouth than the Father cried, then I believe, help me with my doubts.
I love the story.
Why?
Because of the whole "if you can believe" thing. It takes me back to Don Francisco wrote one of his songs. He wrote a song about this story, and it's so good. You can just Google it on YouTube, and he says, "If you can do anything," and Jesus says, "If you can," he pondered. "You ask me if I can. Anything is possible when there's faith inside a man." That were the lyrics to the song, but it's this beautiful story of God rescuing this man, rescuing this boy. Yeah, it's a great story. But I love it because Jesus, all the other stories, Jesus has kind of been pushing people away and looking for faith. This man doesn't have the faith to push through. He's brought him, and it's like he's used everything he can to get there. And Jesus just says to him, anything is possible, because he goes, if you can do anything. It's like all Jesus needs is us to go, Lord, sometimes it's just if you can do it enough. And Jesus goes, Lord, I want to believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. He says, I'm doing my best, but I feel right now like I haven't got a lot of faith. But that's enough. Even that turning to Jesus going, I need you to give me faith, Jesus will respond to that prayer.
He brought everything to Jesus.
Yeah, and it was desperation. And he didn't have this polished, perfect faith with the right prayers. And he's acknowledging he's still got doubt in his heart. He wants to believe, but there's this wrestle. But that's enough for Jesus. Just a heart that says, Lord, this is hard right now, but I want to believe you. Can you help me? That's enough for Jesus in this instance.
Yeah, because Jesus didn't turn him away.
No.
He admitted his doubt, and as you said, that was enough. Jesus could have turned him away.
Yep.
By saying, hey, come back when you've
got your faith sorted out.
Your doubt.
Yeah, exactly.
But he doesn't do that.
No, and I think that reflects something of Jesus' heart.
Yeah.
Without him teaching, the story tells us that God, it's enough for us just to turn to Jesus in our desperation, even if we're not polished in our faith.
This is another point in Mark where I look at it and I go, yeah, that's me again.
Yeah, yeah.
I
I see
am.
myself in that all the time.
Yeah.
I want to believe, but
everyone
right now,
does.
I think it's human story.
And it's okay to have doubts.
Yep.
As long as you keep investigating.
Yep.
And you're trusting as well.
Yep.
And because when he says if, the answer is yes, he wants to. If he can, yes, he will. Yes, he does.
Mm.
Don't you think?
Yes, it's 100%. I think this is the human condition.
Help me with my doubts. Oh, did you see that movie? Let's not talk about that. Seeing that the crowd was forming fast, Jesus gave the vile spirit its marching orders. Dumb and deaf spirit, I command you. The spirit can hear. Dumb and deaf spirit. Whereas we saw the man could not hear before,
Couldn't
so
hear,
he touched him. But the
Yep.
spirit who is not deaf, who is
Yep.
making the person deaf,
Yep.
I command you out of him and stay out. This would have been such a sight. Screaming with much thrashing it left, and the boy was pale as a corpse.
Mhm.
Everyone's like, help me with my doubts. I think Jesus just killed him.
Yeah, that's right. That's what they thought.
just killed him.
He just killed the boy.
Yeah.
He's dead.
He's dead. But Jesus, taking his hand, raised him. The boy stood up. And then the disciples later on corner Jesus and they say, why couldn't we throw the demon out? And he answered, there's no way to get rid of this kind of demon except by prayer. What does that mean?
We haven't got time to go into that. There's lots of different scholarly views around that because other versions will say prayer and fasting, and whether it's led to all kinds of doctrines around different types of exorcisms and what's required for different exorcisms, and the church has built all kinds of theories
How much
on
they've
that.
read into that.
I
yeah.
know, a lot. They've read a lot into
How much law and Torah they've added on.
Yep, exactly. And the church has done that throughout history. One of the clearest teachings I've ever had on this that I think was around the whole concept of prayer and fasting. And I don't remember exactly off the top of my head. I can't remember how it all works. I should have researched it. But Jesus is definitely indicating that there are breakthroughs that we need to get through specific prayers, and we have to actually put effort in. There were things that will require us to have prayer, or things that may require us to fast and align ourselves with God's will and give up some things for the sake of seeing his kingdom come. Now, I just can't remember who it was. I think it's, I don't know, I can't think of the preacher now, but it's really good stuff on this. Or maybe I'll find it and put it in the show notes if I can track it down.
Don't you think, sorry, go on.
Go. Have you got anything on yours?
No, not really, other than a few questions. It's just, there's no way to get rid of this demon except by prayer. I don't get from that little statement all of those things that you are saying. I can see how you do, but to me, it sort of says, well, the disciples weren't praying.
Yes, that's right. Other versions do say prayer and fasting, not just other versions, other manuscripts. Some manuscripts, it says in my notes, say prayer and fasting.
And
so
by prayer, it means to be connected.
Yes, yeah, that's right. If you're not connected, you can't expect to have authority.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rather than this is a very hard
particular demon.
This
That's
demon
right.
is really hard, requires this.
Yes.
There's so much prayer and prayer and prayer.
Exactly.
It's more likely that, I think more likely that Jesus is just suggesting
You need to be saturated
you have
in prayer.
to be praying all
Yeah.
the time. And he says it, pray
I
about
think-
small things, pray about big
Yeah, I
things.
think that's what he's getting at.
Yeah. And it's suggestive that the disciples were not. They were becoming, look how frustrated they are. Why couldn't we do it?
Yes.
We have this power
We've got
now.
this power. We've been delegated this power.
Yeah.
Yep.
They haven't seen Jesus transfigured.
No.
They've just they have the old version of
Yep.
Jesus,
Yeah.
not the
Yeah, gotcha.
new white
Yeah,
version.
I think that's
clean
as good a
version,
reason
sorry,
as
the
any. Yeah.
bright and shiny. Yeah. Anyway, it's just
Yep.
a thought because
Yeah,
I've always been
scholars
like,
have
"Ooh, that's a
argued
bad
over that
demon."
meaning of that. And there would be all kinds of deep reasons. But I think your reasoning, just taking it at face value, is as good as any.
Face value. That's called Occam's razor.
Occam's razor
The simplest thing, the simplest
Yep.
way to
Yep.
do things.
is usually the correct way. That's what it
Yeah.
says. Occam's razor.
All right, we'll keep going. So here they come, and there's this conversation. Who wants to be first place? And they came to Capernaum. And when he was safe at home, he asked them, what were you discussing about on the road?
Which is the greatest, these.
Yeah.
So they didn't want to tell
they
him.
say the silence was
Yeah,
deafening.
yeah, the silence was deafening.
They had been arguing with one another over who among them was the greatest. So you want first place, then take the last place, be a servant of all. This isn't James and John here, is it? This is all of them.
This is all of them.
all of them.
Yeah, it's another
arguing,
reference where it's James and John.
still thinking they're going to be there's going to be a
Yeah.
kingdom,
Yep.
and they're going to be
They're-
delegated
That's right.
roles.
They're going to get roles on it. Yep.
Okay, right, that's pretty straightforward, isn't it?
Yep.
Shows you their heart. They haven't quite got the whole thing at all. It's not, but even just Jesus just tells them before it's about prayer.
Yeah.
And they're thinking.
They still think it's about glory and
So
power.
they just totally ignore.
Yep.
It's all about prayer, connection with
Yep.
God. It's just about
Now it's all about us
power
getting
and glory and money and
Yep.
stuff.
wrong theology of power.
Wrong theology. And then he puts a child in the middle of the room and cradling the little one in his arms, he said, "Whoever embraces one of these children as I do embraces me, and far more than me, God who sent me." What were children like? Like, were children appreciated?
No.
Were they? No. They're under occupation by the Romans. We know that the Romans would leave their babies out to die in the street. And they would have been
Infanticide.
seeing this.
They would have been seeing that. Even in Jewish culture, the children, even though it was probably they were treated higher than than many Romans did, they still had the culture of men first, women second, children third.
Oh,
They're
is
way
that
down the
why
pecking
in this
orders.
book is that they healed the man, then healed the woman, then healed the child?
I have never thought about that. It could be.
Anyway,
I don't know.
Go on.
I'm not sure about that. But that's it. It's as good a thought as any. It's as good a thought as any.
That's like the 5th time you've said that.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's it. There's a lot of things that are left undone.
Yeah. All right. So then Jesus says, "Teacher, we saw a man using your name to expel demons. We stopped him because he wasn't in our group," in verse 38. But Jesus wasn't pleased with them. "Don't stop him. No one can use my name to do something good and powerful and in the next breath cut me down. If he's not an enemy, he's an ally. Why anyone by just giving you a cup of water in my name is on our side? Count on it that God will notice. On the other hand, if you give any of these simple childlike believers a hard time, bullying or taking advantage of their simple trust, you'll soon wish you hadn't. You'd be better off dropped in the middle of the lake with a millstone around your neck." And then he gets graphic language here. He goes and he says, like, if your hand or foot gets in the way, chop it off. You're better off maimed or lame and alive than the proud owner of 2 hands and 2 feet. And godless in a furnace of eternal fire. And if your eye distracts you, pull it out and throw it away. You're better off with 1 eye and alive than exercising your 20/20 vision from inside the fire of hell. Everyone's going through a refining fire sooner or later, but you'll be well preserved, protected from the eternal flames. Be preservatives yourself. Preserve the
preservatives
peace.
yourself, okay.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in this statement.
Yeah, definitely.
First of all, where are they?
They're in Capernaum.
Capernaum.
Yep, which is where Jesus lives during most of his ministry. Peter's house was there, it would appear.
Oh, yeah, but why isn't this happening out place of Gehenna? How do you say that?
Gerasenes.
Gehenna. The fire outside Jerusalem?
I don't think he's gone to Jerusalem, has he?
Capernaum.
Is it at Capernaum?
Have I mixed that up? Talking about the fire that was outside Jerusalem all the time.
He's
burning in the fire.
He's referencing that.
But he's not outside.
He's not in Jerusalem. He's in Galilee at the time.
All right. So they would have known this.
Yeah, they would have known that.
About.
Yeah, definitely they would have known that. Yeah, this concept of the fires of judgment and so on. Yeah, that was pretty normal. Better, yes. They would have understood the concept of Gehenna because it was their version of judgment. This rubbish tip that was always on fire in south of the city of Jerusalem. Yep.
Yeah, and it's like the logical consequence of running away from God is ending up separated from him and his kingdom forever, which is like being in Gehenna.
Yes, it's like being in Gehenna. Yep.
Right, okay.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Yeah,
he's using what is around, well, what they know.
He's using lots of metaphors. He's using salt
speak to
here.
them.
I mean, that version just said preservatives, but it's salt. It's the reference to salt. Salt is good for seasoning, but if it loses its flavour, how do you make it salty again?
Yeah, preserve the peace.
Yeah, preserve the peace. Well, actually, just last week. So what's the date today? It's the 20.
Oh, yeah, fire and salt are symbols of purifying and preservative.
So Monday the 19th of February, if you want to listen to the Bible Project podcast from that week, Tim Mackey was talking all about the meaning of salt and what it actually means and all the different schools of thought of what the metaphor of salt, you are the salt of the earth, and if the salt loses its saltiness and all that sort of stuff. So he was talking about all that. So it's all very fresh in my mind.
Okay.
It's only a week ago.
And salt being, good. I'll have to look at it. Salt being like expressing fellowship and affecting, I've got written here, it signifies an inward sweeting and preservative energy.
Yep. So salt purifies.
Yeah.
Salt, purifies, preserves. Salt is a sign of fellowship. Past the salt, that salt, it would have that kind of connotation of eating and fellowshipping together. It was heavily used in the covenant. There's lots of reasons why.
So we're to be the salt of the earth.
Yes.
Right. Because, okay. So and living in fellowship fellowship. Can't talk. Fellowship with him.
Yep.
And judging evil.
Yep. All of those things are all what we're called to do.
And it seems to be so important to follow him. Mark is saying it is so, so important. Like if you don't get it.
Stay close to me.
Stay
in
close
prayer,
to me. In
follow
prayer.
me. Give up your life. All those sorts of things. That's the true disciple.
Yeah. Better to cut off your hand. This is how important it is to follow Jesus.
Yep.
Cut off your hand.
Yeah, he's using
pull
obviously
out your
clearly
eye.
using metaphorical language to explain that it's going to cost you some things to be a follower of Jesus.
What? It's going to cost you things to be a follower. Okay, so you're reading it as you will cut off your hand to follow him.
I would say yes. If there's things that are going to get in the way, cut them off.
Right.
Get them out. Gouge them out. Anything that's going to get in the way of you, that's going to get into your eye, it's going to get into your heart and toxify your heart. Get it off. Get your eye out of the way.
Yeah. Okay. As a cost, I saw it as more like a warning or a threat. But
the rest of the gospel so far seems to be talking about and demonstrating that it's not a walk in the park to follow Jesus. There's a cost attached to that.
Yes, and you're right, because the next verse after that, everyone's going to go through a refining fire.
Yes, that's
sooner
right.
or later.
Yeah, sooner or later we'll be refined and to bring up what's really going on in you.
And though it's painful, it's actually good for you.
Yep.
As a servant of Christ who is self-suffering.
Yep, good. That's it. I like that, Jeanie.
Oh, well, thanks. I like it so much. Let's move on to chapter 10.
Oh, we've got the last chapter. We're nearly there.
Here we are in chapter 10. Now, in this chapter, divorce is brought up. Now, I'm going to treat this quite lightly.
Okay.
Because this really needs a big...
Not that divorce is a light thing. But
it needs a bigger conversation.
It needs a bigger conversation,
Yeah,
sure.
so I'm just going to go have a few questions, but not going to go into it at depth.
Yeah, it's probably worthy of a different conversation entirely.
Might do more of a disservice
Yes.
than a good...
That's right. That's the sensitivity of it. Yep.
So there's, in this, which I found most interesting, was there are 3 little statements about Jesus that are peculiar to Mark.
Mm-hmm.
First is in verse 14. It says, Jesus was displeased. I think that's the actual wording.
Okay. It says he was angry with his disciples. Yep.
Okay. I had a typo in my notes.
Okay.
Verse 16, he took them in his arms, the children, I guess.
the
and
children,
verse 21, Jesus loved him.
Okay. Yep.
He's painting a different picture of Jesus than other books. He's angry and displeased, but then he's holding and he's loving.
Okay. Okay, so we're getting the full range of emotions.
Full range of emotions, yes. And I think it really sums up the whole chapter, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see where we go.
Yes. And, I just got a text message. I need to reply yes or I lose my appointment tomorrow and they charge me $50. All right.
Yes, it's done. Well done.
Quickly. Yes. Okay. So the first one, the first part of the chapter is about divorce, and there's crowds around him. And he's in Judea, across the Jordan, and a couple of people, they crowd around him, as so often the case, and he teaches them, and then the Pharisees come up intending to give him a hard time. So they want to ask him a tricky question here. They want to put his foot in his mouth kind of thing. Is it legal for a man to divorce his wife? And Jesus said, what did Moses command? And they answered, Moses gave permission to fill out a certificate of dismissal and divorce her. So what happened to this divorced woman when they got divorced?
In that society?
Yeah.
Well, the theory would have been that she should have had a dowry from her father. That would have been her livelihood if she was divorced. So when the man married her, he would have to give the father a dowry, and that dowry would then be made available to be her livelihood until such time as she married again.
Really? I read the opposite.
Didn't always work though.
Yeah, I read that the man would actually take all of her property and keep everything and leave her destitute.
Well, yes, that could have been abused in that way. Yes, I mean that's what the point. I think that would be the case. Is that's the part of the problem. The problem was the society was set up in such a way that the bride's father, was supposed to get a dowry, and that she would, and then that dowry would be set aside and used in the event of a divorce or in the event of the husband dying, so that she would have some sort of livelihood. But men abused women in this culture. So oftentimes the dad would spend the money. I mean, even Jacob's father-in-law, Rebecca and Rachel, they go, well, Dad spent all our dowry anyway, so we might as well stick with Jake here. So that was the problem. But yes, there was this sense in which the man could just take everything and leave the woman destitute. And that's what Jesus is addressing here.
Yes.
So even though the dowry principle was there, that's the point I was trying to make, didn't always work.
Okay. And when the woman is divorced, she is destitute.
Yep.
She often cannot remarry because she's
If she's
being
been
discarded.
if she's been legally divorced, she can remarry, but oftentimes
the man won't
the man
marry
won't
her.
marry her. That's right.
Right. Okay. So it leaves this woman very
Very vulnerable.
And I read that people were in this time divorcing their wives for simple things like she accidentally burnt them. Yeah.
Yep.
Or he saw someone prettier.
Yep. That was all it took.
And that was it. They could just divorce because they had manipulated the law into the way they wanted it to be.
That's right.
They were doing all these things which
they had
were not
created
right.
tradition from the law, like we were
Yes.
talking about earlier in the episode. That's exactly what they had
lost
done.
the heart of marriage.
Yep, that's right.
And then Jesus goes on to say, Moses wrote this command as a concession to your hard-hearted ways, because in the original creation, God made male and female to be together. And because of this, a man leaves his father and mother, as you know, and they become one flesh, no longer two, but forming a new unity. Because God created this organic union of the two sexes, no one should desecrate his art by cutting them apart.
Yes.
It's a funny way to put
Desecrate his art.
By cutting them apart. And that's in the original. That's what it was.
That was God's original intention in Genesis.
But it's a protective relationship.
Yes.
Protective and close, equal relationship.
Yep.
And they had turned it into everything
the opposite of
that. Yeah. So I always see this as Jesus is talking way more about how people should care about others and about connection than the simple act of, well, not simple, but than the act of marriage.
Yes,
itself.
I think it shows it definitely shows the God's intention for the intimacy of a relationship, whether that's a husband-wife relationship or just relationships in general, that there should be a selflessness in those relationships rather than a selfishness.
Yeah. And when they were back home, the disciples bring it up again because they're confused. Like, what's going on? Because if Jesus had said they can marry, they can get divorced, if Jesus had agreed with the Pharisees, then why doesn't Jesus agree with everything else the Pharisees say?
Sure.
But if Jesus didn't agree with Moses,
then he could be accused of being a lawbreaker.
Yes.
That's right.
So instead, he just sort of says this stuff to give them food for thought.
He's really good at doing that because remember, they're trying to trick him.
Yes.
They're trying to deceive him. Basically, they're trying to out him so that the crowd will turn on him.
Yeah.
And he outs them in the process with very, very clever. It's like the whole give me a coin and show me whose inscription's on it. He did this sort of thing all the time. Yeah. He wants to reverse it and show them the error of their ways.
Yeah. And what he's showing them how they're devaluing the women as well.
Yep. No doubt about that.
And marriage is meant to be for blessing.
Exactly. Well, I won't go into this in any way. We said we can't touch this in any depth. But, verse 12 says, and if a woman divorces her husband and marries someone else, she commits adultery. Or verse 11, whoever divorces his wife and marries someone else commits adultery against her. And if a woman divorces her husband and marries someone else, he commits adultery. Now, that has been weaponized by the church in ways that aren't healthy because they've just taken it at face value there. But the point we're trying to make with this passage is Jesus is not saying divorce is wrong all the time.
No, he's not.
He's trying to attack their demeaning of the value of women, the men's value. That's where he's going with this. He's saying your sinful, selfish hearts mean that you think it's okay to devalue a woman to the point where she's left on her own and she's now going to have to go and commit adultery. She's now going to have to do that to survive. That's the problem. And that's what he's having a go at.
And I think he's also using the word adultery here because of John the Baptist. Because John the Baptist was killed by Herod.
Yeah.
And he's just riffing, he's riffing on that.
Okay. Yep.
Because we've seen it played out once in the story. You have to see it play it out again.
Okay. I have not thought about the connection there, but I mean, he's having a go. Yeah, I guess so, because that's what the problem was, that she basically just left Philip and hooked up with Antipas. Yeah, that could make sense. Yeah.
And he was committing adultery because the guy was still alive.
Yeah, it's exactly right.
Yeah.
According to the law, he was still alive. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
And I think here he's discussing marriage in a way that mirrors his commitment to us.
Okay.
Because marriage comes up a lot in the Bible, which we talked about
the bride
last
of
time.
Christ
The bride
and so
of
on.
Christ. And I think as well that, or what do you think about this? The idea that the law was written to sort of, it included rules to limit divorce, to limit the pain and injustice that it can cause.
Yep. We've talked many times in this podcast about how God, God voluntarily limits himself to work within human understanding and capacity at the time. That is a good example of it. He's saying, look, this isn't the ideal, but I'm going to put I'd rather you not get divorced, but because of human sin and the fact that you mistreat one another and all that, I'm going to put some framework around it so that you can, if you do this, it'll actually be closer to my way of doing things. You'll honour women and so on.
Yeah, this is the ideal.
Yep.
In a loving relationship, this is the ideal.
Yep, exactly. He's saying, but I'm going to put this in because your hearts are hard, but I'm going to make sure that you don't abuse it to the extent that you were doing prior to the law. Like, who's the dude in Genesis chapter 11 who has, multiple wives? And he said,
which one? There's many.
Multiple. No, the guy who says, if Cain is judged 7 times, I'm going to be judged 77 times. He's basically collecting women.
Oh, right, okay.
The picture is this guy's collecting women for himself, for his trophy wives. And that's how bad things get. So it can make sense that they would put some restraints around that to say that's not the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and what Jesus does here is flip the whole thing where
over.
The Pharisees are like, women can be discarded.
Yep.
Jesus is like, no.
Yep.
There's actually value that needs to be placed on them because they are valuable.
Yep, that's right. He's valuing or raising the value of women in their eyes, and he's about to raise the value of children in their eyes too.
Yeah, because in the next part, they bring children to Jesus just hoping he might touch them.
Yeah. So it says one day some parents brought children. So Mark has set this story here straight after elevating women to show you that now we're going to elevate the kids. It doesn't mean it happened on the same day, but he's put it in there for a reason.
Yeah. Who is this man?
Who is this man?
Elevating women, elevating children. It's just unique.
It is.
And the disciples here, they shoo them off because the disciples were just perplexed by the divorce statement as well.
Right,
they had to get their heads around this idea as well, that women, what? We should care about them?
It's a little bit like, it's better not to marry, they said.
Then they shoo the disciples off. You're having a real coughing fit.
I have got a coughing fit. Tickle in the throat.
Tickle in the throat. All right. Jesus was irate and let them know it. Don't push these children away. Don't ever get between them and me. These children are the very center of life in the kingdom.
I love that.
What does that mean? The very center of life in this kingdom.
I think he's going to have to go on and tell you that. He says, I tell you the truth, anyone who doesn't receive the kingdom of God like a child will never enter it. So I think he's trying to say you've got to come back to that simplicity of faith. I think that's the point, is that you can get all these rules and regulations can get in the way of the simplicity of faith.
Because as children, we're more trusting. As children, we're helpless in that sense. We know that
there's a vulnerability.
Yeah, we know we can't do everything ourselves. We have to rely on someone else to help us. That's what it's meant to be like in our faith. To say to Jesus, "Hey, I can't do this.
Yep,
you
that's
can do
right.
it."
Yep, I think that's the point he's trying to make. Come as a helpless child does. Yep, you don't come with that simple, trusting, reliant faith where you can't do anything for yourself, then you're not going to be able to enter the kingdom of God.
Yeah, and the difference is as adults, we think we can do it all, right? We think we're able to answer our own questions, make our own homes and businesses, and but children
just have to accept faith that they're provided for. So we've had women, we've had the elevation of women, we've had the elevation of children. And he's going to go on and talk about a rich man.
Yeah, he does.
Different perspective, like a different who can enter the kingdom of God. He's sort of following on from the last story.
And the thing is, as well, as children, it's like we know we need him.
Yes.
As adults, we don't know we need him. We'd say
we
don't.
No, that's right. We become self-reliant rather than Christ-reliant.
Yeah. And then to enter his kingdom in the next part, he goes, there's a conversation about that. He goes into the street and a man comes running up and basically tells him how good he is because he does everything that the law
I follow
requires.
all the laws.
But he's earnest. He actually does
He-
want
he
to know
ha-
more.
yeah.
Good teacher, what must I do to get eternal life? Eternal life. Not everybody believed in an eternal life, did they?
Mhm.
The Pharisees did. But
Pharisees
the
did, Sadducees didn't.
not.
Yeah.
So let's say 50% of the community did and didn't.
Yeah, I'd say most did. I think the Pharisees, Sadducees are probably in a rare category. Most of them probably had more influence with the Pharisees.
Okay. All right. And Jesus says, why are you calling me good? No one is good, only God. Is he denying his Godhead here?
Yeah. I think he's just. I think once again, scholars would argue about that. I don't think he's denying his Godhead. He's just trying to point them to. He's trying to point this man back to God, back to what really matters is that there is one good God.
Yeah. Or is Jesus saying, hang on a minute, why are you calling humans good?
Yes.
Only God is good.
Yes, I think that's what he's
saying. So
saying.
there's a fault in the guy's thinking.
He's thinking,
because
yes.
he's thinking humans
He's
can
good
be
enough.
good.
Yep, that's it. Well
and
done.
he too
That'll
can
do.
be good.
That's better than I could have said it. Yep, that's right.
So he thinks he's good enough
He
to get
thinks
into
he's
heaven.
good enough.
What is the one last thing he needs to do?
And
And
he's saying,
he's-
no, only God's good enough.
Yes. He says, teachers, I have kept all the commandments from my youth. And Jesus looked him hard in the eye
And loved him.
and loved him.
Mm.
He said, there's one thing left. Go sell whatever you own and give it to the poor. All your wealth will then be in heaven, will be heavenly wealth, and come and follow me. That's an invitation to follow him.
Yeah,
As
once again, it's an invitation
become
to
possibly a disciple, although
and
they're
it's-
already 12.
There's
but
cost.
yeah, there's
In his
cost.
case, he has to give up the thing that he is clinging to.
Okay. So that was what was important to him.
Yes.
He had to give up that, but he had to trust God.
Yep. We all have to give up the thing that is our idol.
Yeah, because there's human security and wealth, isn't there?
Mhm.
And the fear of unknown. Like, it would have been terrifying. I don't blame this guy. I don't think I could have.
Yeah, it's a big call.
It's a big call.
Mm.
Yeah. And he goes away, and we don't know what happened to this man.
Nope.
His face falls, and
He goes
it's
away.
the last thing he expected to hear,
Yep.
because no other teacher would say this. The Pharisees
Nope.
certainly wouldn't say that.
No.
They would actually say, yeah, that plot of
the-
land for my
yeah.
mother is actually for
Yeah,
God.
that's
I'm
right.
gonna
The
keep it."
richest, the sign of riches is the sign of blessing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More money, the more righteous.
Yep. That's
The
right.
more influence and power.
Yep.
And Jesus is saying,
Give
get
all
rid
that
of
up.
all of that up and come and follow me.
Yep.
It's a really hard thing to do. That's why he says it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle, which is such a funny thing to
Yep.
say. It really is. But you get it.
You get the
can-
picture.
You get the
Just
picture.
trying to squeeze a camel through there.
Yeah. Whether or not he actually did say that, I know there's scholars who
Yeah,
debate
it's
that
got
whole
it's
thing.
scholarly about what it means.
But I like it. I'm going to keep
It's a
it.
very vivid analogy, isn't it?
It's funny.
Yeah, that's right. It's
too.
humorous. Yeah.
It's humorous. Imagine
Yep.
Jesus saying, oh, well,
Yeah.
so much easier for a camel to
Yep,
go.
that's right. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he's doing. I think there's a big part of that. He's trying to use hyperbole
Yes.
to illustrate points, like cut off your hand, gouge out your eye, camel and needle. They're all hyperbole.
Things you
hyperbolic statements.
remember.
Exactly.
Yes.
We remember hyperbole.
Yeah, we do. I'll never forget that. Camel in an eye. Whatever. Wait,
Yep,
what
camel
was it
in
again?
the eye of the needle.
You know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But I think the rich man is a slave to his riches, isn't he?
Yes, they own him. He doesn't own them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's what
why
he
he's got to
can't
give it
see.
up. No,
And Jesus is saying it for his good,
because he cares
good
about
intention.
him. Remember, he says that he looked at him and loved him. It's like Mark took the time to say, Jesus is saying this, about to say this hard statement, but he's saying it because his love for him is so great that he knows this is the thing that's holding him back from the kingdom.
Just like the disciples couldn't see, the blind man literally couldn't see, this guy can't see that he is slave
Yes.
to the money.
Yeah, and it's his love that is compelling Jesus to tell him to give it up.
So sometimes the hardest thing Jesus asks us to do is often the best thing for us.
And to realise that some of the sacrifices that we have to make in life are actually because those things are actually not going to be good for us in the end. We need to give them up because they will destroy us if we don't.
And this poor guy, I can imagine him going back thinking he's going to get eternal life, but he's still just so caught up with the material thing. It's like this whole idea, like, I'll be happy, like if I get the new phone, I'll be happy with
Yep.
the new phone, but then the new phone becomes the old phone.
Yep, doesn't take very long.
No, it doesn't take long at
No,
all.
that's right. And that's not going to bring happiness. It's not going to bring lasting happiness.
So Mark here makes me feel sympathy for this guy. I feel sorry for him.
Yeah.
I do.
Yep.
I like him too.
I think Jesus deeply felt sorry for him too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows what happened to him? Who
No,
knows?
that's right. And I think that it's left open-ended because Mark wants you to hang on that and identify with him. I mean, the question is, where are we like that? The fact you say you feel sympathy for him, I do too, because he was trying to do the right thing. He couldn't let go of that one area of his life, which we were talking about earlier in the episode with the Pharisees. It's like, just let go of that one thing that's holding you back.
And the scenario confuses the disciples. It says here in verse 26 that conversation set the disciples back on their heels. Well, then who has any chance at all?
Yeah.
You know, if it's easier for the camel to go, who has any chance? And Jesus was blunt.
Yep.
No chance at all if you think you can pull it off by yourself, which is what the man was thinking he could do because
he thought he was good enough.
He was good enough, yeah. Every chance in the world if you let God do it. Okay. No chance if you think you can do it, but every chance in the world if you let God do it. And Peter tries another angle. But we left everything and followed you. And Jesus said, mark my words, no one who sacrifices house, brothers, sisters, and everything like that because of me and my message will lose out. They'll get it all back, but multiplied times, many times in homes, brothers, sisters, mothers, and children and land. And then he adds this little bit on, and also in troubles.
Persecutions, yep.
What? Why did he add that part?
Oh, yeah. Vanny couldn't have added that on.
Does that mean we are going to be multiplied many times in troubles or that we will get it back while we are in troubles? Multiplied many times in troubles or we will get it back while in troubles. We'll get good things while in troubles.
Yeah. I just think based on our conversation earlier too, let's see what it says in this version. For my sake, we'll receive now in return 100 times as many houses, brothers, sisters, and mothers. Okay, so he's using metaphorical language here because I don't know about you, but giving up one house doesn't automatically mean you're going to get 100 times more houses in this life. He says now. So I think he's using hyperbolic language once again, to explain this whole concept of the cost is worth it. You'll give up things, but you will see blessing. You will see favor. It's not like it will always be hard and life will be miserable. Even though life will be costly, there will be blessings along the way. You will receive, because in many of these people, they're going to receive family. They're going to join the church. They're going to have brothers and sisters and experience the joy of all that sort of stuff as being part of the family of church. But I don't think we should take it as a literal formula that says, okay, I'll give this up, I'm going to get this in return.
I didn't take it as a...
Some do.
As a positive or a negative?
People take it as a positive.
Okay.
I
was just looking at that last
bit, the persecution.
Also in troubles.
Yeah, so this version says along with persecution. You said, and also in troubles.
Okay.
You asked, is there 100-fold persecution?
Yeah.
I don't think that's what it seems to be saying here. I think he's just saying, look, you're going to follow me. You're going to see some good things and you're going to have some hard times. But stay the course. I don't think there's anything more in it than that. But what have you got?
No, that was just my question.
Yeah,
I didn't have anything other than the question.
Yeah.
All right, and then Jesus goes on and says, and then after that, there's the bonus of eternal life.
Yes.
This is the great reversal. And this is another time now Mark is mentioning that many who were first will end up last and the last first.
Yep.
He's talking about service.
Yep, and he's also talking about the bonus of eternal life. So he's talking about this is the eschaton. This is the end.
Yeah, I think this is the first time he mentions eternal life.
Is it? Okay. Yeah, so he's starting to talk now about beyond this life beyond
Is it?
this
Could
life.
be the first time. I don't recall him mentioning it before, do you?
I don't recall, but like I say, I always get the gospel stories conflated. But yes, in this, he's talking about the future eschaton that we hang on to, and he's saying, hang on for that. That's the ultimate goal. You'll get this. You'll get some good times. You'll get some persecutions, but hang on for the eternal life thing.
Very different to the idea of the Messiah and the new kingdom.
Yes.
Of new kingdom of Israel.
Yep.
Yeah, that they were thinking of.
Yep, that's right.
Because
So
that was
totally
meant to
different.
be a kingdom.
No persecution.
No persecution.
Exactly.
Very different. So they're still like, what is this guy? What
still
is
trying
this
to work it
journey
out.
I'm on?
Yeah.
And then they go back on the road. They're heading towards Jerusalem now. And Jesus had a head start. And they were following and they were puzzled and not just a little afraid. He took the 12 and began again to go over what to expect next. Listen carefully. We're on our way to Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
When we get there, the Son of Man will be betrayed. He uses the word here, betrayed.
Betrayed,
He hasn't used that before.
Right.
He actually hasn't said this part at all to them.
No,
So
this
he's
is the first time he's telling them in about what's going to
more.
happen.
So it mentioned eternal life and now betrayed to the religious leaders and the scholars. Then they'll sentence him to death and then they'll hand him over to the Romans. Hang on a minute. The Romans who he's
you're
meant
supposed to kill. Yeah, exactly. Kick out of town.
Yeah, you'd just be hearing this going, what?
Well, this is not what this is what Messiah does.
And then worse, in a way, they'll mock him and they'll spit on him.
Flog him and kill him.
And the spit that Jesus uses heals. The spit that the Romans has is an insult.
Yep.
And they'll give him the 3rd degree and kill him. He's very concise here, isn't he?
Yep.
After 3 days, he will rise alive. The only thing they don't understand is the rising alive part.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they had seen the little girl. No, they didn't see the little girl raise. He didn't take them in, did he?
They took Peter, James and John in, I think, and the child's parents.
Okay.
Yep.
Did he? Yeah, okay. Yes, all right. He will rise again. But this is now the 3rd telling of him predicting the future.
Yep.
So if they didn't get it once, they didn't get it twice.
They've got a 3rd time now.
Got a 3rd time.
Yep.
It's not like he didn't give them any warning.
It's not like he didn't tell them, even though they still couldn't figure it out.
No, they're not figuring it out. But how could you, though?
Well, you're blinded by your own indoctrination of what you've always thought Messiah would be. And this is all written in the Old Testament, the suffering servant of Isaiah. It's all there. But because they had been so conditioned to see one Messiah, they could not comprehend a different Messiah. I don't blame them for that because it's a bit like with Revelation. I've been conditioned to see the book of Revelation one way. It's taken a long time for me to wind it back and go, oh, okay, I can actually see this a different way now.
It's going to be an interesting, very interesting podcast, that one.
Yeah, fun.
And preaching series as well. Oh, what was I going to say? Oh, why were they afraid? The disciples were puzzled and afraid. Maybe Jesus was walking differently. I don't know. Maybe he was burdened.
Yeah, maybe
there was
you can see the weight on him.
Yeah, the weight on him.
He's on a mission now.
He was blunt before.
Luke says he's set his face as flint to Jerusalem. Like, I'm going this direction and I am resolute about it. I think the other versions say he's resolutely heading to Jerusalem.
So a change had come upon him.
There's something going on inside Jesus in his psyche that is now perhaps they're picking up on.
And they're puzzled and they're afraid.
Mm.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yep. They still couldn't get it. Jesus told them straight and they're still trying to work it out.
And while they're afraid, they still manage to have this conversation.
About who's the greatest.
Even though he's just said to them, hand it over to the Romans who will kill him, they have the conversation.
Yeah,
who's the greatest?
Who's the greatest?
And James and John want to be awarded the highest places of honour. One of us at your right and the other at your left.
This is 2 of the dudes that have been up on the mountain and everything.
Yep. They're still pursuing their own ideas of who Jesus is.
Yeah, other versions tell us it was John and James's mum that came and
I know,
questioned
read
Jesus
that,
about
yeah.
this. Yep. That's how they do it in the trip.
This is Peter's, remember, this is Peter's retelling of the story.
That's right.
So
he's personalising it.
He's cut out the mother and
it's all James and John's fault.
He's blaming James and John.
That's right. He's blaming James and John.
That's amazing.
This is my chance to get at James and John now. Yeah, that's right.
That's really funny.
I mean, John does the same with Pete, gives Pete a hard rap in the gospel, the resurrection at the temple too. So it's fair. This is their way of getting at each other. Bit of ribbing.
This is their version, their truth. This is Peter's truth.
This is the narrative he's told himself over many years. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So just James and John, not me, Peter, were arguing about this. And Jesus says to them, you've got no idea what you're asking. Are you capable of drinking the cup? Drinking the cup is a thing, isn't it?
Yes.
Like it's a saying, drinking the cup is a cup of judgment.
Yes, it's often referred to in the prophets as a cup of judgment. Yes, they would drink multiple cups. And they would have cups at the Last Supper and they would represent covenants and judgments and things like that. Yep.
All right. So drinking the cup I drink here is meant to be
suffering.
Yep,
you're going to drink the cup of suffering.
And he says something of being baptized in the baptism I'm about to be plunged into.
Yeah.
Being baptized into the baptism. What does that mean?
Well, he's about to go through a baptism of suffering, a baptism of death. So he's using the same analogy as drinking a cup.
Oh, baptism of fire, which he's just also said we will go through, refined by fire.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, so baptism is an immersing. So so is the cup. You drink the cup, you drink the whole cup. And you're completely immersed. It's emptying out upon you.
Pours down the beard, drips on that.
Yeah, drinking the cup, not pouring on the top. Drinking the cup's fully drinking it. But it's that same thing, completely taking everything on board, immersing, baptism is being immersed in suffering. Jesus is about to be immersed all the way to death. And he's saying, can you go all the way to death? Oh, yes, we can, Lord. He goes, well, actually, you may not realize it, but you are going to drink. You are going to suffer.
You are going to suffer.
But as for who can sit at my right hand, that's actually up to my Father.
Well, here they say, I'm about to be plunged into, and they go, sure.
Yeah, we can do that.
Why not?
Yep.
And Jesus said, come to think of it, you will drink
you
the
will
cup
drink it.
I drink and be baptized. As to awarding places of honor, that's not my business. There are other arrangements for that.
Yep.
And he's alluding to something in Revelation, right? Who's going to be set?
The 12 tribes. Yeah, I haven't thought about that, but yes, it could be that.
Not that John Mark knows that, but
No, I haven't thought about that.
John Mark, yeah, it is John Mark.
Yeah, Mark, yep,
Mark,
John
yeah.
Mark. I haven't thought about that. Yeah, it could be.
All right. Look into that.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, whether or not that's exactly what he meant, but there's definitely reference to the tribes. No doubt about that, yeah.
And then the other 10, they hear this conversation. Notice how it's the other 10. So Peter is definitely the other 10 here. They lose their tempers with James and John. And Jesus gets them together to settle things down.
Yeah, he settles them down.
Remember,
they've been arguing about this for a while.
Arguing, and they've heard about Jesus, the Son of Man, going to die, be killed by the Romans, and all they're thinking
He's
about
talked
is
about
themselves.
giving up your lives and all that kind of stuff, but they still think it's about power, not about emptying of power.
Emptying of power. And just like Jesus took the guy out of Bethsaida, here he gets them together.
Yeah. Guys, I'm sick of you arguing about this. Let me teach you.
Yes, you've observed how godless rulers throw their weight around, but basically he's not going to be like that. And when you guys get a little power, how quickly it goes, and when people get a little power, how quickly it goes to the heads. It's not going to be that way with you. It might be right now, but it's not.
Well, that's
going
right.
to
He's
be
saying
that
it's not
way
going to
with
be.
you.
You're behaving, basically saying you're behaving like the Gentiles right now. You're behaving like the peoples of this world.
And whoever wants to be great must become a servant. Now, this is, again, the pattern of threes. Third time the servant, 3 stories of bread, 3 mentions of bread.
Okay, yeah.
3 times servant, 3 times of his death and resurrection.
Yep.
Not resurrection. No,
Death.
yes.
Yeah, well, he is
death,
talking about
suffering.
Yeah, suffering. Yep.
3 mentions of the suffering. Mark likes threes.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
No, I haven't seen that before, but you're pointing them all out. There's a lot of them.
Okay, and then we have a blind beggar here in Jericho, which is the last stop on the way to Jerusalem.
Yep, last town as you come up out of the Jordan Valley, heading up into Jerusalem, the city of palms.
And he's leaving town and his disciples and a parade of people trailing him.
Because he's heading to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
They're ready to make him Messiah.
And there's a blind beggar by the name of Bartimaeus. And he was sitting alongside the road. And when he hears that Jesus is passing by, he cries out, Son of David. We haven't heard that before, have we?
haven't had that one.
No. Jesus, mercy, have mercy on me. Many tried to hush him, but he yelled again, all the louder, Son of David, have mercy on me. This is a compliment, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Son of David.
Yeah, this is another messianic term.
Recognition
Yep.
of a blind person
Who
gets it.
Gets it. He sees the Messiah as the Son of David. Yep. He hears that Jesus is coming and he wants to call him.
Have mercy, Jesus. He doesn't say, heal me, have mercy on me. And Jesus stops in his tracks and calls him over. And everybody's annoyed at this, right? Don't they? Or is that a different story?
Oh, there's other versions. But look, just stop the fact that Jesus calls him over. Other versions say he went into the house, closed the door, and then called him to come.
He calls a blind man
through the crowd to come.
So
he doesn't go to the blind man.
Yeah, he has to make the first steps. He can't see. Trust, walk towards me.
That's right. There's a lesson in that, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
That's like how Jesus was walking past them and they had to call out on the water. It's the same principle. He had to call out.
It's your lucky day. The people say, get up. He's calling you to come. Throwing off his coat, getting rid of the past, his coat, and
the beggar's coat.
He was on his feet. So that's how he made his money. So the rich man
had to give away his wealth.
Yeah. And this guy immediately throws away
his thing that can make him his livelihood.
So he would put his cloak down and people would put money in
it.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
He
had to give up his source of wealth.
Give up his source of wealth.
But the rich man couldn't.
Gets up, have mercy. And Jesus asks or says, what can I do for you? And the blind man said, Rabbi, I want to see. On your way, said Jesus, your faith has saved and healed you. No mention of sin.
No.
No touching. no spitting.
Yep.
Just on your way. Like he's got a plan and a purpose. On your way,
good.
your faith has saved you
I like
and
it.
healed you. In that instant, he recovered his sight and he followed Jesus down the road. In that instant, he gave up everything he had for this.
Yep. I love that. It's a final way to sum up the call that we've been talking about, this call of discipleship. It's costly, but he gave it up so that he could experience a better life, the fullness of life that was available in Christ.
And this is contrasting what James and John were just doing. They were wanting power and recognition. This guy, he doesn't want any of that.
No.
He just wants to
He
follow.
just wants
He trusts
follow Jesus.
and follows. Look how Mark cleverly did that.
Yeah. It's so, the way the narratives are woven together are so intentional. We don't really think that because we're conditioned to think historical narrative is A happened before B happened before C. We don't realize that's not how they're working. They are deliberately telling stories, weaving them together, not in chronological order, but to illustrate a point. It's rather more like, I guess, like fictional storytelling. It's true story, true events, but they're not worried about the order. They're worried about telling them in a way that tells the story in itself. It's very clever.
It is clever, and this is almost like the beginner's guide to faith.
Okay.
He's begging. He's getting the money.
He's
he hears
calling
about
out.
Jesus.
Yep.
He believes the evidence. He decides who Jesus is
Yep.
based on what he's heard. He leaves everything behind. He goes to the teacher, ditching the old stuff,
he lets
ditching
the old
everything.
go.
He trusts that Jesus has something better to offer.
Yep.
And then, not like James and John, wanting status and power,
He just follows.
he doesn't even think he deserves help because he was calling for mercy,
Yeah,
which is
good.
God's undeserved blessing.
Beautiful.
So when he's face to face with Jesus,
So he wasn't like the good man who's,
No.
yeah, wow, this is so good, Jeanie.
he admits his helplessness.
Yeah.
He wants to see.
That's
And his
great.
response, he sees the miracle and he leaves everything behind and follows him.
What a great
A
way to
changed
finish,
life.
wrap it up. A changed life. Love it.
Yeah.
That's good.
It
Hey,
is
we
good.
made it.
We made it to the end.
These are long chapters as we work our way through, Mark. We've
Yes.
still got one more with you, I think.
Oh, no. One more long
One
one.
more. One more long one. One more long
I
one. And then
tried to
the
be
rest of them will be
quick.
shorter. Well, until we do the other Gospels. John's Gospels are pretty long too. Chapters are pretty long.
There's just so much to talk about.
There is a lot.
There's a lot.
I think that's the thing is that wrapped up into these chapters is 4 or 5 stories in every chapter.
Yep.
That's why they take so long.
There's a lot to discover, and in it is Jesus.
Yes,
I
he's
hope.
there.
That's who I'm looking for.
That's what you're looking for.
Yes.
Are you getting there?
Oh,
You sound like you're picking up little gleaning things about his character and his nature as you go.
yeah, I am. I find myself thinking over it during the week,
Okay.
thinking, I hadn't thought about that before.
Okay. Good.
Like, particularly the blind man, when he took him out of the village. I was like, oh, Jesus takes you out of the situation that you're in.
Yeah.
Whether you see the problems or not, because he couldn't
Couldn't
see it.
see. Jesus saw what he needed.
Saw it, took him
good.
out. And he,
That's deep thinking.
yeah, it's like he wanted just eyesight, but Jesus gave him so much more
than that.
and
Yeah.
saved him,
Yep. And made him whole.
made him whole,
Sozo.
sent him on a different
Zoe.
way, a different path.
Yep. Definitely. I like that.
See?
Yeah.
so
see,
much in
that's
this.
good. That's great. That's a good way to think of it. All right. Well, let's call it quits on this episode.
Oh, finally.
Finally. Well done. Well, thanks for persevering, everybody. We're back with chapters 11 to 15 next
yep.
time. Then Pastor Jeff's going to get to do the final
Yeah.
chapter.
And then I'm done for a while.
You're done
Good.
for a little while.
Yeah.
All
We'll
right.
have some shorter versions after that.
That's all right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Talk to you soon.